All right, everyone. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming your way on a Wednesday night. It's 7 o'clock Eastern time. We're talking college football all the time. We talk it in May, June, April, every month of the year. So let alone this football season as we approach week 4. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're coming across our product for the first time, we deliver the best in discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. Yes, we do. And check out the videos because we bring on the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation. And you get stuck with some analysis from myself as well. And tonight we've got open forum here. So we've got, I've got a link out to all the folks that follow me on Twitter. And that's for media guests. That is for media guests only. Viewers, if you would like to comment, of course, you got the phone lines. We've got 860-325-3687. The audio version of all these fine live streams and videos you can find at Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play if you just like to listen. And that's understandable. If you don't want to look at me or anybody else, you just want to hear our fine voices and the wisdom that drips from our lips, then you go to the audio platforms, Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Just search Mark Rogers TV. YouTube, again, like, comment, and subscribe. I think we know enough about YouTube and search engines and the online product, the analytics, to know that that drives it. So if you like what you watch here, and for some of you, you don't necessarily like it, you don't necessarily agree with me, but you like it. You know, you don't agree with me, but you can't get enough. You want to hear some more. You want to argue with me some more. So you really like it. Like, comment, and subscribe. George makes up for most of the comments. At least he did today, I believe. Thank you, George. George writes comments just to help me out, I believe. So I appreciate that. Many of you just are phenomenal. Phenomenal in building the platform where we've got about 5,500 subscribers. Let's go for 10,000 by the end of the football season. 10,000 by the end of the football season, and a lot of possibilities regarding sponsorships and some revenue that we could possibly build on. One being where you can help us out immediately would be down in the description section of any of the videos that you come across. The description section is the same. You will find the place where you can go to the link to find the audio podcasts. And then you will also find 3 links from Amazon. You don't need to buy those products. They are college football related products. But that's not important. Just use the link to do your regular Amazon shopping. And if you don't do any shopping, like I don't, then you need to get your significant other involved. You go grab your significant other and they do the shopping, and you get them to use the link, and that will help us out remarkably. All right, like us on Facebook as well. Follow us on Twitter. All right, we're talking college football week 4, and released my top 25, the top 25 that makes sense earlier this week, and received much backing and also much criticism, and that's the deal. We've got LSU at number 1 this week, and the LSU Tigers coming off the 1-point win at Auburn. The bottom 10 was released as well, so I need some feedback on that. I don't know how many views are on that, but I will produce a bottom 10 each week. If you liked that and kind of caught the spirit of the bottom 10, it's kind of the most embarrassing 10. Florida State, Nebraska, UCLA, they're not the 10 worst teams in the country. I don't know, the way UCLA is playing, maybe they are. But they probably aren't the 10 worst teams in the country. They're the 10 most embarrassing football teams and situations in the country going on right now. I had a whole lot of fun looking that stuff up and producing the video, but I need to hear from you if you like the bottom 10. I'm going to ask you about the bottom 10, and we've got a call coming in from one of our fine viewers. All right, here we go. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
DeAndre Croft.
Got DeAndre on the line. What's going on tonight, my good man?
Mark, I just have one problem with your top 25.
Okay.
How do you have Notre Dame in front of Clemson and Ohio State?
Okay. Simple.
I don't get that one.
2 good wins versus 1 good win and 1 good win.
Okay, but both of those wins at home. Now, how you going to call Vanderbilt a good win and it wasn't that good last year?
Last year. Are we ranking last year?
Yeah, okay, but who has Vandy beat? Nevada and Middle Tennessee State?
Yeah. That's who they beaten.
Okay, Clemson went on the road and beat Texas A&M at Texas A&M, which is one of the hardest places in the country to play.
Who said that?
And they have a lot of fives.
Are they?
A&M.
One of the toughest places to play, Texas A&M?
Yeah.
Maybe if Alabama would have showed up and played there. No, it's a good win for Clemson, but they did underachieve in the game.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. But it's still a Texas school. Texas is the king of college football. They should never be down. Texas, all those Texas schools, at least Texas A&M, and Texas should always be good. So,
no, it's a
Texas A&M has top 10 recruit last couple of years, haven't they?
It's a good point, Andre. I'm just fooling with you a little bit, but okay. My thought process is, so you understand that starting with week 1, we have to make some assumptions. So let's say, let's just take one game. Notre Dame beat Michigan. We're assuming Michigan's good to a certain extent. Maybe they're not great. Maybe they're 8-4 good, but they're a good team. We have to make that assumption until maybe later in the season when Michigan's 2-9, we say, okay, well, we take that kind of off of Notre Dame's resume because that wasn't a very good win. But at the time, we kind of make that assumption. So the more they play, the less assumptions we have to make. But at this point, we're still making some assumptions. And one assumption I'm making is that Notre Dame is one of the 10 to 15 best teams in the country. And Vanderbilt went up there and they played that well. And that Vanderbilt's, I don't know. I need to see a little bit more out of Vanderbilt, but Notre Dame has at least beaten a team in the SEC where the SEC right now is excelling, and they beat Michigan. They've got 2 good wins, what I would consider to be 2 very good wins versus Clemson having 1 and Ohio State only having 1.
Okay.
And you do understand, Andre, I think you get this point because you didn't make this point, but I'm kind of speaking to the audience. They don't always get that I'm not ranking the best teams. I'm ranking the resume.
Right.
Yes, Clemson's better. I believe Clemson is a better football team than Notre Dame. If they play tomorrow, I would pick Clemson to win by 10 to 14 points.
Okay, I agree with you, but Notre Dame, I'm just saying, for watching the game, struggled with Ball State, who just got blown out by Indiana.
You're right. They did.
And all 3 games that Notre Dame has played have been at home. Now, they're going to Wake Forest, and Wake Forest, I go plenty of Wake Forest games. They're going to hold like 31,000, and that's probably going to be mostly Notre Dame fans, just like when Clemson goes there. It's mostly Clemson fans at Wake Forest, not a lot of Wake Forest fans. So I just don't Notre Dame, and I definitely don't think they're better than Ohio State. I think Ohio State, in my opinion, is probably the second best team behind Alabama because they can finally throw the ball down the field. And Clemson's 3 and Georgia's 4. I mean, all 4 of them interchangeable. I don't think nobody can touch Alabama.
Well, if I got 23 out of 25, Dondre, I'm doing pretty well in your eyes. If I got 23 out of 25,
I totally agree with you.
No,
I totally agree with you. You did a very good job, but it's hard to give Notre Dame and Michigan props sometimes because I think they're some of the most overrated teams in the last couple of years of college football.
Oh, there's no question about that. You're right.
One more thing. Do you think Florida State's going to turn it around?
Oh, boy. Wow. I think part of it's going to have to do with their schedule. So they could play a lot better, and their record may not necessarily reflect it because they played 3 games in which they're already favored in. I thought they had the hardest schedule in the country, and I certainly know that they've got one of the 5 or 10 toughest, but I rated it the toughest in the nation. They still have Notre Dame and Florida out of conference, and then they've got to carve through that Atlantic division. They haven't even started yet to get through the Atlantic, and they've still got Miami in the Coastal. They basically have no easy game. They just played as you well know, Dondre, they just played the team that was picked to finish in last place in their division. That's who they just played, and they lost by 23 points. They're just boy, they're a mess right now.
I don't think people give Syracuse enough credit. I know they've been struggling over the last couple of years, but Syracuse is pretty good. And you remember I said this at Clemson was going to lose to Syracuse. I said it's on a short week, the quarterback's hurt, and the kicker just got hurt. You got a new kicker kicking in front of people. But Syracuse, they done beat Virginia Tech 1 year. They done beat
last year, or 2 years ago. I'm sorry.
And, oh, 2 years ago now?
2 years ago with Virginia Tech, yes. And then you're right. All 3 games at the Dome, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Florida State, 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, that offense is just so hard. The spread they run, and throwing the ball. And you're right. I mean, it's going to be hard to tell because they still got Boston College, too. And I think Boston College is pretty good, and I don't know what's going to happen with Wake Forest's quarterback situation.
Quarterback, yep.
But we'll see. Well, Mark, thanks for talking to me. You have a great night, and I enjoyed the show, sir.
Thanks, Dondre. We appreciate your phone call and look forward to talking to you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a great night.
So our guy, Dondre, he is a big Clemson fan, but I appreciate the comments that he makes because there's no question that he's a huge Clemson fan, loves his Clemson Tigers, but at the same time, Dondre really balances out his opinion and is neutral on a lot of things. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's George. How you doing today?
George, how are you? You were making some comments today for me.
What a blast. When people ask me what I did at the end of the world, I'm going to be like, hell yeah, I was on the internet watching college football.
That's going to be your contribution. Well, your contribution, and I know you watch other shows, and I know that and that's great, and then you comment to other shows and contribute there as well, and I think that's tremendous. But just your contribution to me, George, you know, you've been there for a long time, and you get people to like, and you comment all the time. It's just it's an amazing help. It really is. I don't think people realize.
I wish it could last forever. I don't know how long the wormhole will stay open that enables us to communicate through the space-time continuum, but as long as it lasts, I love it.
Well, I haven't figured that out. As soon as you give me the metrics on that, we'll know when doomsday comes.
I think there's 4 really awesome games this week, and the first one comes on Friday. It's Florida Atlantic USF. Isn't that great for Friday?
Yeah, it is. It's really good. It is.
I'm so happy. I couldn't believe it was on Friday. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much.
So you're going to watch that?
What do you think? It's a big time game. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's a big time game, but
it's big for Friday.
It's big for Group Friday, and it's big for the Group of 5.
Come on, let's overanalyze this game. Possibly win?
You're telling people in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten that that's the only game that night.
Oh.
Sorry. Got Penn State and Illinois playing up there in Chicago, and we've got Washington State, USC, don't we, on Friday night?
Go Illinois, go Washington State.
Excellent.
I really didn't know that, by the way.
Well, let's look at the schedule here because I want to make sure we're straight on these Thursday and Friday games here. So keep going. You want to see Lane Kiffin on the sideline here this weekend doing his thing?
I accidentally have them in a betting pool. I'm stuck with FAU on this game. I was already bet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily the best play, but yeah, on that.
I know, but can they possibly win by any chance?
Oh, can they win? Yeah, they can win this game. USF's going to lose at some point. Florida Atlantic. This is going to show us a lot of things because obviously FAU had to play at Oklahoma and they were completely outclassed and just completely annihilated in the first quarter and never were in the game.
I saw that.
Man, Central Florida.
That doesn't mean anything in college football. Come on.
No, these teams change week to week. I understand. It's about matchups. Man, I got to think that the line on this game's about 2 touchdowns in favor of UCF.
I have it heads up. I only need to win by 1. I can't win on a point spread.
Okay, well, you've got a fighting chance in this game. It's going to be the first chance I've had to see either one. Although I saw Central Florida on opening night that played UConn, I watched the first half of that game, and it just wasn't a game. But they're really good.
It's something we don't talk about much, but I can't believe that we got Lane Kiffin at FAU and Charlie Strong at that other school. Like, are you serious? Really?
Well, this happens down through the years, George, if you really think about it, where either a coach failed somewhere and he gets knocked down a peg, or it's a coach who's kind of run his course throughout his career, and he kind of migrates back to the group of five and takes an easier gig in which they love him. Now, this has happened to Butch Davis, and it happened to Howard Schnellenberger and Bobby Ross, or some other coaches that were big-time coaches at big schools, kind of later in their careers kicked back. But these guys aren't. Yeah, they took a hit, and now they got to kind of pay for it and pay their dues again.
I just still, man, Florida's got some power in the coaching ranks and the player ranks. How it just proves schools have bag men. All these kids are from Florida. And we got the most people and the most athletes and the most speed positions. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You got 6 schools. Did you live in Florida for a long time, George?
Yeah, I was born there.
Okay.
I was born like 30, 40 miles from the campus, so I have to cheer for them. And I hate the Florida State Seminoles after Bobby Bowden left. I used to like them when they had Bobby Bowden, even though they were a rivalry. And Jimbo Fisher just seemed a little crass for me. C-R-A-S-S, crass. I didn't like the guy. And now he's at Texas A&M, so I hope Alabama and Mississippi State and Auburn and LSU whip his ass every freaking year.
Well, who's really lovable compared to Bobby Bowden? That guy's about the most lovable coach around.
Hard act to follow.
Yeah.
So I'm locked in with Stanford against Oregon. Do I have a chance?
Well, of course you got a chance.
All right.
I was taking some notes on that game. We were talking about it the other night. My take is that Stanford is a better team. If they were going to play every week for the rest of the season, Stanford's going to win most of the time, but it's just that one game. And they've got to go to Autzen Stadium at night, Saturday night, and Oregon is just going to be geared up for this thing.
Man, I don't even like the Pac-12, but some of the greatest games I've ever seen are Stanford, Oregon. They've had some great games, man.
So what's the Oregon fan base like up there? How close are you to the University of Oregon?
Well, I was born a few miles from the Gainesville campus, and it's not the same up here.
Okay.
There's no equivalent to football up here versus down there. Up here, if you lose, it's like you go out to dinner and have a few laughs, and it's okay. Down there, your whole week's ruined.
That's right. I know. I know. I was down there, and I certainly, I live and breathe football.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. Up here, if you lose, you go to a RuPaul show and laugh it off.
RuPaul, yeah. I'm sure she's a frequent.
That up, but that's kind of how it is.
I'm sure she's a frequent visitor up there in the Great Northwest.
My other team I'm locked in on is Wisconsin versus Iowa. I can't get out of it. I already bet. Do I have a chance?
You went with the better teams, George. You know that you went with the better teams. You're just in a rough situation in terms of playing at 2 very difficult places to play at night in both situations. So
it wasn't me. It was Uncle Lou.
Okay.
He picked 52 games in a row for me in 5 minutes. I said, give me 1 second answers. He picked my kid's whole Coca-Cola betting sheet on the Coca-Cola football poll in 10 minutes.
Well, I'm
stuck with these picks.
You probably
all these. It's all his fault.
you probably made a good move. You just need to keep track. If he goes 20-32 or something like that, you'll need to ditch him. But if he pulls through for you, then you go back to Uncle Lou. Obviously, yeah.
It's 4 games a week for 13 weeks. 4 games a week, right? And
okay.
He has lost 1 game each week. My kid said, Dad, some people have missed 0 games so far in this betting poll. I'm like, how is that even possible?
Oh, it's possible.
Lost 1 game.
Come on, they've only played 12 games. It's only week 4 coming up. So with 3 weeks times 4, 12 games. Well, do you know what
That's what I tell my son.
Hey,
that's what I tell him. But I'm asking myself, like, man, to have picked every one of those 12.
Come on,
that's a good start.
Come on, George. I'm going to go back to week 1 here. I got my prediction sheet right here. Do you remember what we had in week 1? They're the best teams, the most important games, right? Obviously.
Right. Of course I remember.
So week 1 must have been Miami LSU, right? Must have been one of them. And Florida State, Virginia Tech, I'm guessing.
Not on my sheet.
No, okay. Michigan, Notre Dame was probably one.
Yeah.
Did they throw Washington, Auburn at you?
Yeah.
Then I'm guessing the other one.
Louisville.
Okay.
Alabama, Louisville was the other one.
There you go. So I did miss the Miami LSU game, and I was kicking myself, but I was 3.
Me and Uncle Lou on the phone when he said Miami.
Yeah.
I said, really? I would have taken LSU.
Yeah,
I said, I'm going to bet Miami, and I bet Miami, but I would have taken LSU on that one.
We were dumb. So week 2.
And I would have lost the Michigan game no matter what happened, because I will never bet on Notre Dame until the world ends. I just hate that team.
If you want to win betting pools, George, you got to take your heart out of it a little bit more.
I won't bet on those teams. I won't bet on somebody like Florida or Notre Dame.
So in week,
I can't. I'll lose every time. I just can't do it. I can't bet against Florida, and I can't bet for Notre Dame or Penn State or some of those teams. Even Michigan's a tough one for me.
Okay, week 2, George. Georgia, South Carolina had to be one of your 4 games, right?
I don't pick these games. This is some random guy.
No. I know, but I'm saying that these had to be the 4 games that were on your sheet.
No. It was Colorado, Nebraska, Clemson, Texas A&M, UCLA, Oklahoma, and Fresno State, Minnesota.
Fresno State, Minnesota. They selected that game? Really?
They do that.
Okay.
They do that.
Okay.
They throw some weird stuff in there.
All right. I'm 6-2 so far. And then last week was what? What were your games last week?
Texas, Nevada, Ohio State, and Boise State were my picks.
Nevada. Who were they playing?
I only lost Boise State.
Who did Nevada play?
Can you believe that? I won Texas, Nevada, and Ohio State last week. Those were Uncle Lou's picks on my kid's thing in a 10-minute pick on a phone call one night. He got it right 3 out of 4. I have no idea why he said Boise State, but I remember when he said that, I went, hey, why not?
Well, I was there with him on Boise State, too.
800 yards a game last year or something,
Yeah. Right,
so
sir.
This week he gave me Florida, Wisconsin, Stanford, and Florida Atlantic. Do you think Florida will beat Tennessee?
Yes, I do. But a lot of road games there for you. A lot of road games to try to get through.
I used to always jokingly say we have 19 returning starters and 5 incoming 5-star, whatever, but we just have to see now, it's nowhere to hide anymore. It's all out in the open. We're going to find out.
Yeah, you got some big games coming up with Georgia and LSU. No doubt. The Gators will have to show us something.
Right.
All right, George.
Tell everybody if they hit the like button, it'll help you go viral.
Yes, you tell them.
I already did. They just won't do it. I don't get it. I have liked every video I've ever looked at on the internet. First of all, it makes me hard to track, like he just likes everything, But second of all, like, why wouldn't you? I don't get it.
Well, and the other thing I try to tell people,
unlike counts for the same thing, by the way. You need to unlike. It doesn't matter. Just hit one of those 2 things, like or unlike, So Google knows someone looked at it that way, they can track it.
And I try to reason with people and say, hey, if you like what we're doing, but you may disagree with me on the video, but you at least think I know what I'm talking about, and we had fun and whatever, and you think, we're doing a good thing here, can you hit the like button? But yeah, even if you don't, hit the unlike button. Give us something.
I have a feeling it's really just Google suppressing you and YouTube. Remember I told you that once?
Well, we're creeping up there, George.
Just to keep it lighthearted, so we don't have to blame the people in the comment section. It's probably just YouTube's fault. Yeah, they've suppressed us. I think you gave me like 5 million subscribers the other day. You thought I have at least 5 million, something like that. Nice.
Well,
the other day on Uncle Lou's thing, I made some kind of comments on a phone call, and he actually had 200 likes on a fucking video for the first time ever. And I'm like, why not? Why not? When you got 206 people in the chat section, you should have 200 likes, Yeah,
if you guys are having a good time and we're talking college football here, sure.
If you move to Gainesville and tell everybody you've always been a Gator, you could do this too. Just be Uncle Lou in Florida. We need an Uncle Lou, man. We need some guy that's just funny and can quote stuff off the top of his head, and you can't ruffle his feathers. He's cool, and he's a Georgia guy. I'm being, honest about it.
Noah's got our count at 16 likes. Lou's a Florida guy. You're saying?
No, he's a Georgia
Well, I know
guy.
he's a Georgia fan, but he's from Florida?
No, I'm saying you should move to Florida and tell everybody you've always been a Gator.
I caught that.
In your heart.
Sure.
And start over. Because Ohio State, it's going to take years to rebuild after you get rid of Urban Myers.
Is it really?
I'm just teasing you, man. I hate people that have it made in the shade like you do. You and Georgia and Alabama have it made in the shade, and Clemson. You have no excuse for ever losing.
Every time there's a couple buddies at work where every time Ohio State seems to be in trouble, like the NCAA is going to come down on them, he's like, it always works out for you. The one time you got hit with something, Tressel gets fired, and a year later you hire Urban Meyer, so it worked out for you.
Yeah. In all honesty, I hope it works out that way. You have the biggest stadium in the country and the most fans. It should work out that way.
Well, it's a good time talking college football, and we hope Florida comes back for you, George, and that'll be fun. If they're playing some really big, meaningful games late in the season, we can talk up.
All right. And I love Miami and South Carolina, too, and Tennessee. I understand. I'm right there with you. I hope I win every game. I used to know I was going to win. Now I just hope, just like all you guys, all the second-tier teams. Well,
thanks, George, to people like you, and you're at the core. These live streams aren't exactly exploding, but they get bigger all the time. They get bigger and better. I had about 2,000 views from one that we did, must have been after the Ohio State TCU game. So we're getting there.
If I knew what to do, I would tell you. The only thing I can think is to hire one of those services. It's totally legal. They will help, get you on top of the list, like the number one. They just keep hitting your shit again and again and again with a machine, and they get you to the top of the list.
Okay.
But even then, it's a very fickle crowd. There's just, there's got to be a certain select 1% of the population that will stay on a live feed and do a chat and all that. And that's what you're looking for. That's enough people right there. That's plenty to have a career.
So I got some questions.
You can monopolize on it.
Before we let you go, George, speaking of which, I got a couple questions for you here. So what kind of videos do you like to see? I know you watch almost all of them, or at least try to help me out in comments. But which ones do you like the best? Which ones do you like the best? Which ones do you think will do the best?
Concerning college football?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing here. College football, George.
Well, Mark, I just, when it comes to just flat analysis, I don't care. I'm just looking for entertainment. That's why I prefer Bobby Durkins and Alonzo and Lou and Tennessee Roadshow even.
Then
they're homers.
What are you watching me for? What are you watching me for?
Because I tell them you should be their moderator. You know what I mean? You're like the level-headed, middle-of-the-road guy that's going to, stay basic and give the plain answer on everything without siding with anybody. They're homers. And mostly they're just disgusted at their own team, and talking about why do we not pass. And, so it's more of a, I don't even know how to describe it, but you know what I'm saying is they start out by being for one team, and then they're willing to let everybody else into their enclave. You're for everybody. It's different.
I gotcha. I'm just trying to get a sample of what people want to hear.
It's two totally different platforms. They're homers, and you're not.
Okay. You know what? I had an idea.
And listen, Lou has been pretty adept at bringing everybody else into the fold. You can be anybody else's fan, and he tolerates you and talks to you and integrates it into his show. And
yes, he does.
The whole show to it.
I know. I've seen it. He does a great job. I enjoy it.
He's making it up on his own. He's creating the style and the platform, and that's why I used to say I want you to move to Florida. Like, do that for Florida, because Florida doesn't have that guy. We have some boring analytics. And they're not boring. They're good guys. I like them. I'm not mad at Will or Dave or any of those guys, but it's not like Uncle Lou. It's not a sideshow. It's not a circus sideshow with a lot of loud rock and roll music and people going, woo!
Do you think I'm really the guy to run a circus? George?
No, but you know what I'm saying? You could throw some flashbang stuff in there.
Oh, I
can.
can.
Hey, listen, you asked me what I thought.
Oh, I can.
People have a 30-second attention span.
Well, I can get on a rampage if I need to, if I want to. But yeah, so moving to Florida,
it's not even rampaging. It's just. Can you imagine if you were a hardcore Ohio State fan and you decided to cop an attitude and just talk about your team and do everybody else on the side note?
That's what people tell me sometimes.
Have some attitude. You could really slap some stats out there and show things and.
Well, if it comes down to leaving Connecticut and moving to Florida, I'm all for that, George. I will do that tomorrow.
Don't do that. Do it from Connecticut. Nobody cares where you live.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But
it's the Internet of things.
All right, George. Good times.
I'm worried about Florida and a tidal wave. Just stay in Connecticut. Move to the mountains.
Yeah, I've got enough hills around me already. Enough bears and all sorts of other stuff crawling around.
Of all places, Connecticut.
Yeah, they're up here. Believe me.
Wow.
They're all over the place.
That state exists. You know that, right? You're like hidden. That's like a neighborhood, a retirement neighborhood or something.
Well, not exactly that. I think we have it over maybe Rhode Island and Delaware in terms of notoriety, but not by much.
I guess.
Not by much.
Delaware runs the whole country, if you understand the Corporate Act. Yeah.
Delaware.
Yeah, everything's registered in Delaware. Even the United States of America is like whatever. It's registered there.
All right. George, we appreciate the phone call.
I know.
You have a great night.
Thank God for college football.
George says you must like the video.
I want to give a big shout out to Dennis Wilson, that poor, long-suffering Miami fan who's always on the comment section. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he just commented.
Nothing to brag about right now. I feel sorry for Miami fans. I really do.
Yes, well, they'll have their day here. All right, George, I think we've got some other folks calling in, I believe.
Right, bye, Mark.
You have a good one. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
See ya. All right, our next call coming in. See what we got.
The call will start at the beep.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
What's up, Mark? It's Big Papi JT.
Big Papa. What's going on tonight?
Nothing. I posted a few videos this week on my predictions. I've been doing it for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I have 4 takes I want to get in, but last week I was disappointed in Boise State. You see, I made my Boise State versus Oklahoma State preview and analysis. I had the stats and everything, and if you listen to the video, it sounds like I was bashing Boise State, and all these Boise State fans came at me talking about something. You're not giving us enough credit on the defensive line, even though we're smaller, we're more skilled, and I chose Boise to win the game. Well, I didn't know Boise State's fan base is a lot bigger than what I thought it would be. And they gave some interesting takes, and they said that this team would be the best Boise State team since the 2011 Kellen Moore team. And you know, they said they was going to blow out. They was going to beat Oklahoma in a blowout, which I thought was crazy because Oklahoma doesn't really lose at Stillwater that bad and put up less than 20 points. So Boise State ended up losing, disappointing me. But I want to ask you about a few things. So the first one being my top 10. So now this was my top 10 before. I made this, I believe, as soon as I think I made this Sunday morning, like at 1 a.m. So here's my top 10. So at number 1, I had Alabama, which you could argue that any other team deserves to be there, but I put Alabama there because of how they completely annihilated Ole Miss. Number 2, I put Georgia. Then at number 3, I put Clemson. At number 4, I had Ohio State. And then on the outside looking in, at number 5, I had Oklahoma. Those 5 teams right there, you can debate anybody to be the number 1 team in the country other than Alabama. They're obviously number 1, but outside of that, you could switch spots with any of those teams. And then the controversy really came with 6 through 10. So I had LSU at number 6, which I was right about that. I wasn't trying to be accurate with my predictions. I was just putting my top 10 teams. I felt had Notre Dame at number 7, and Notre Dame at number 8, and Stanford at number 7. A lot of people were asking me why I chose Stanford. I chose Stanford just because I felt like it would be a lot of backlash if I didn't put them in there, because I don't believe Stanford is I believe Stanford is an okay team, but they have a tough road stretch. They got to play Oregon on the road, and then next week they got to go to South Bend and play Notre Dame on the road again. 2 tough road environments. So I just put them at number 7 just because I don't think they're going to stay there. I think they're going to lose one of those games. I think they're going to lose to Oregon.
Big Papi, Big Papi. I got to stop you right there. Please, let me interrupt real quick. Okay. You got us to number 7, right?
Yes, I have
Stanford is 7. Okay, I got a couple questions before we continue. Okay. Obviously, we all have whatever criteria we want to rank our top 10 or top 25. That's perfectly fine. It's all opinion. But I've got a few questions. Number one, what are you basing your ranking on? Are you basing it on you just think these are the 10 best teams in the country in order, and I don't care who they've lost to, who they've played yet, even if Alabama would have played Furman, Citadel, and Mercer the first 3 weeks, if you thought they were the best team, you were going to rank them number 1. That's what I'm getting first and foremost. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just clarifying. Because, for example, if you've seen my top 25 videos, I've got LSU number 1 right now. I don't believe LSU is the best team in the country, but I believe that they have the best resume. So that's why I'm ranking them number 1. And then I rank everybody subsequently based on the results on the field thus far. The issue I have is the next thing I heard is for you, you're looking ahead, right? You're making projections. So your top 25, you're saying, well, so-and-so's got to play them in a few weeks, and they got to play them in a few weeks. Or why are you having reservations about where you're placing somebody based on where they might fall in a few weeks? What's that have to do with where they should be ranked right now?
Because I didn't want to put them in my top 10, but I didn't really. I thought it would be a lot of backlash. A lot of people be like, "Why you don't have Stanford there? Stanford is a all-right team." And at one point, I was sold on Stanford being a top 5 team, but then I just saw them play San Jose State, and then I started watching the film, and I started watching the game, and it was a lot of things about Stanford that I didn't really like, and the offense, the offense is like abysmal. I believe they're like 100 and something.
Okay.
I don't know what happened to my stats, but they're like 100 and something in total offense, and they're like 64th passing the ball, and they're around that 100 range rushing the ball, and I'm just not sold on them.
Okay, see, Big Papi, if let's say this is the start of the season, nobody's played yet, and you believe, pick a team. Just pick any team. LSU. You think LSU's the 10th best team in the country. But you look at their schedule and you think they have the toughest schedule in the country. Let's say they play the SEC, plus they play Ohio State, Oklahoma, and USC out of conference. They just have this ridiculously tough schedule. Where would you rank them?
I was still ranking them number 10 because I believe they can win out, and I believe they're a very, very good team.
Okay. So my third point was going to be, and this is just me talking. This is us having a conversation. I'm just throwing ideas at you. Is my suggestion to you, my advice from my humble experience would be, do not care what anybody's going to say. Do not care about any backlash. Do not adjust your rankings based on what you think people are going to like or what they're going to criticize. That's my suggestion.
Okay, I'm gonna take that into strong consideration.
You're gonna be more respected.
Like
You're gonna be more respected for standing up for your opinion, as long as your opinion is valid and it's based on some level of logic and reason.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, let's continue. We got Stanford at 7.
And then I had Notre Dame at number 8. It was kind of in between because both teams aren't really good. Stanford really should have lost to Vanderbilt. But if you watch the Vanderbilt game, I was watching it, but then I thought Notre Dame was finna. Notre Dame came out that Vanderbilt game really, really strong. They had like a really strong position. Vanderbilt looked like they didn't know what was going on. But then the Auburn LSU game came on, so I flipped that game. I thought Vanderbilt was going to get blown out. And then I magically checked back to the game, and Vanderbilt had this as a game. And Vanderbilt would have won that game if the wide receiver was able to hang on to that pass at the end.
Yep, I was watching.
I have Notre Dame at number 8. You could argue that they could be number 7 over Stanford, but I just feel Stanford is a better team than Notre Dame right now. And Notre Dame, I'm not sold on Stanford over Notre Dame. Number 9, I had Penn State. Penn State is really, really good despite not having Saquon. Even though I haven't watched a lot of games. I haven't even watched the Penn State game at all, I don't think. I think I watched the first quarter of the Pitt game, and then I switched the channel. And then number 10, I had Auburn. Even though they lost to LSU, I still feel they're a great team and probably the top 10 team in the nation. I wasn't going to put Washington there. I would definitely was not going to put Washington there. I'm not sold on Washington. Washington is forever going to be the most overrated team, I feel, in college football history. For a team that dominates the Pac-12 and then gets dominated by non-Pac-12 teams, I wasn't going to put them there. So that's my top 10.
The most overrated team in history.
That's just how I feel about. I believe I talked to you about this last time. How I feel Washington can dominate the Pac-12. You can dominate the Pac-12 because for some reason Washington just knows how to dominate the Pac-12 for some reason. But then when they have to play a non-Pac-12 Power 5 team like Alabama, they just get dominated up front. They got dominated up front against Auburn. But for some reason, they were still able to keep the game close, which was surprising. But I don't know. Washington just is not good. They just struggle up front against other Power 5 opponents when it comes to the defensive line and offensive line. It just looks like they just get thrown around the field.
The offensive line, I would totally agree with. I don't necessarily know about the defensive line getting dominated, but the offensive line, yes, was dominated by Alabama 2 years ago, Penn State to a lesser degree last year, and certainly Auburn, a couple weeks ago. The one chink I'll find in your logic there is you just said that Auburn's the 10th best team in the country, and then you jump to Washington being completely overrated and nowhere near Auburn. And they were on the same field just a few weeks ago. That was a close game in Atlanta.
And I was thinking about that, and I wanted to put. I really want. In my head, I really wanted to put Washington number 10, but I just can't do it. And I was watching the Utah game at the same time, so that probably didn't help neither. But I just can't do it. Washington, I just don't feel is a top 10 team in the country. I just don't feel it.
Well, I have no issue with that. Washington, I've got them 17. I don't have any problem with where you've got them placed. I got them 17. I don't have any issue with where they're placed, Big Papi. It was just that you made the statement that Auburn was really good and they were number 10 and they just lost to LSU by just 1 point on a last-second field goal. And then Washington just seemed to be like millions of miles away. So I was just clarifying that. The one thing that I think that a lot of people get wrong with rankings and seems to be odd logic is that let's say LSU's really as good as they're playing right now. Let's say they finish 11-1. They're really good. They're top 5 good. And they continue this for the most part. Auburn lost to them on a last-second field goal. You know, there was one play in that game about 4 different times that could have completely shut LSU down. they converted a 4th down on the last drive. They were that close to losing. So I don't know that Auburn should take that huge of a hit if you're just looking at how good you think the teams are. It's not quite how I rank the teams. I've got a different method, but yeah, it's just one of those things where every week we get another layer that we can go by, where we're really high on a team and then we see that they struggle or they lose, and it just gives us another thing to go on. This week we're going to see was the Wisconsin game that was that a complete aberration that they lost to BYU, or maybe they're really not that good this year. Maybe they lose at Iowa, or maybe they have a chance of getting better and they get back on track and they have a chance. And a number of teams are like that. Look at the TCU Texas game. They're both coming off big games. One won the game against probably a lesser team in USC, and TCU had to take on Ohio State, what that we think is a top 5 caliber team. So we're going to see those two teams play this week and see who's better right now. So every week's a layer to go by.
And I want to talk about the Stanford and Oregon game. Now, Stanford has a tough road stretch. They have Oregon on the road, Notre Dame on the road. They have Utah at home. Then they travel on the road to play Arizona State. They have Washington State at home, and then they got to travel to face Washington. They got Oregon State at home, California. Then they have UCLA. But when you look at this Oregon game, I know now Stanford, they've been pedestrian on offense. It even says that even when you watch the film, Bryce Love is that. It's basically the team he didn't play, they played against. Stanford struggled against, I think it was UC Davis, I believe. They struggled. Alex Costanzo, like his mechanics, like he threw 2 interceptions and all of them were all his fault because his mechanics were just off. And this Oregon team, even though they struggled against San Diego State or San Jose State, Justin Herbert I'm going with Oregon because Justin Herbert is the best NFL prospect quarterback right now. He's projected to be the best quarterback. I believe he is. You could argue that Drew Lock, Missouri is, but Justin Herbert is going to show, is going to put the nation on notice of why he's the best NFL quarterback prospect right now. And I believe he does some damage to this pretty average Stanford team. When you just look at the Stanford team stats, I don't know what happened to them. I had them earlier, but I guess I deleted them on accident or lost them. But Stanford was like 50th in pass defense, and their defense was just pretty average. And this Oregon offense is pretty good. I believe they're top 20 or either top 10 in the nation running the ball, which was surprising to me. And I believe that this Stanford team is not good at all. I believe they're 8-4 at best. But this Oregon team is going to put people on notice. My only concern about Oregon is that the wide receivers against San Jose State were not able to create a lot of separation. And because of that, Justin Herbert was holding the ball longer. And against tougher Pac-12 opponents, him holding the ball longer is going to leave him susceptible to getting hit more and him getting more sacks and him maybe getting injured. I hope not, but the wide receivers just weren't that good at creating separation against San Jose State. And I just hope that the wide receivers are able to do better against Stanford. I'm not high on Stanford. Stanford has good trench play, I believe, because some person in one comment section of a video I was watching was like, it was Stanford versus USC, and the USC fan was rambling on. He was like, USC is supposed to be a football school with some of the best talent in the nation. And he couldn't understand why they kept on getting shown up by Stanford. He said, I don't understand why we get shown up by Stanford, a college that has to have players academically admitted before they can go to the school, even if they commit. And a lot of people were like, whoa. Despite that, Stanford gets pretty decent talent, and they have pretty good offensive linemen. So, basically what I'm trying to say is that I believe that Oregon is going to win this game based on just skill position. I believe they're just better than Stanford in the skill position wise, and plus they had Justin Herbert. But I believe that if Oregon cannot win in the trenches or run the ball against the Stanford defense, they're going to lose this game, because I think that's kind of what Stanford is, more of a, they want to run the ball, chew time off the clock. They're one of the more traditional offenses that we have in college football right now, because a lot of these teams go to the no huddle. They want to get the defense tired, but I believe Stanford just wants to run the ball. With Bryce Love, they can certainly do that. But Justin Herbert, I believe, is going to have a coming out party against Stanford, and Oregon's going to win this game just because they have the better quarterback.
Okay. Stanford, Oregon, Cardinal right now at number 7 in your poll and the real poll. Oregon at number 20. Let's see where I've got these teams ranked. I have Stanford right now at number 8, and I've got Oregon. Do I even have Oregon ranked? I don't believe I've got them ranked, because that's the way I do things. They haven't played anyone. They're not ranked until they beat somebody or play somebody. If they would play Stanford close, they might get ranked. Anyway, here's my take on the game, Big Papi, is that, you hit on a lot of important points that I think make a whole lot of sense. If these two teams played over and over and over and over, that if they played 10 times, Stanford's a better team, I believe, than Oregon top to bottom. But Oregon's got a very explosive team. And I don't mean, first thing that comes to mind is explosive playmakers on offense. I don't necessarily mean that. They have a top 10 NFL quarterback in Justin Herbert. So they got a major advantage right there. They got a guy that can go out there and win a game with his arm. On a defense, as you well know, they've got one of the best defensive coordinators in the nation in Jim Leavitt, and they improved by 50 or 60 spots last year in the advanced metrics over the team before, because Jim Leavitt knows what he's doing. Jim Leavitt was the defensive coordinator at Colorado when they jumped out of nowhere and won the Pac-12 South and won 10 games. So he is that good. And he's got the guys like Justin Hollins and Troy Dye and Jalen Jelks, who's a beast along the defensive front. So Oregon's secondary has some really big-time talent, and at outside linebacker and defensive end, they have a really good defense. As long as those guys don't get hurt, they are paper thin on defense in regards to depth, but they have some outstanding players on defense. They got the NFL quarterback. They have the home crowd. They've got a night game. Stanford would win this game 7 out of 10 times, 7 or 8 out of 10 times, I believe. But I may be picking Oregon in this game. I have yet to do it for this week, but that's the way I'm leaning toward the Ducks.
And another game I want to talk about. Now, this game, I'm being a lot. You might say I'm being a lot biased, but Florida versus Tennessee is going to be the game to watch. I'm gonna get into Texas A&M versus Alabama. That's that's probably my second last take on here. I don't like Florida. I'm a Miami fan. I have obnoxious Florida Gator fans at my school. The FSU fans died down. Thank God. Thank God for Syracuse, because them FSU fans were really getting on my nerves. But about Florida, like these Florida fans, they won 4 games last season. They didn't make it to a bowl game, and they think that Dan Mullen, the quarterback quote guru, who was the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach of Alex Smith, Dak Prescott, Nick Fitzgerald, Cam Newton, even though I don't know why Florida fans count him, even though he transferred to Auburn, or he went to JUCO first, then Auburn.
Sure.
But they thought that they were going to go from 4-7 to national championship contenders. I don't know what's wrong with Florida fans. I don't know what drugs they're doing, but they have to be doing something, because this Florida team lost to Kentucky. Now, I was sold on Kentucky because I really like their quarterback. He's one of my favorite players in the country. I can't believe I can't think of his name right now. But
are you talking about Terry Wilson?
Yes, him.
Okay.
I watched him in JUCO. I watched his JUCO highlights. He is very good. And Kentucky could have won that game by an even bigger margin if he didn't have the turnover problems. I believe he had the fumble. He had the fumble at the 40-yard line, and then he had the interception, I believe, near the red zone, outside the red zone, outside of the 20. And if he didn't have those turnovers, Florida would have lost that game even worse than what they did. And it was somebody who was talking about Florida is just as evenly matched as Kentucky, and that's a recruiting problem, and it needs to be addressed. And I agree with that. They're just as evenly matched as Tennessee. Now, I have Tennessee winning this game. Despite Florida fans, I told Florida fans at school they were going to lose. They was like, how they going? They got blown out by West Virginia. And I was like, but you guys don't, Florida doesn't have the offense that West Virginia has. Felipe Franks is like Malik Rozier, but worse. Well, I don't know. You could say he's better, but I'm going to just say he's worse because he's not really as athletic. He's athletic, but he's not as athletic as Malik Rozier is. And the Colorado game, I thought Colorado would put up a little bit more of a fight because KJ Carter-Samuels is a very good quarterback.
Yes.
He leads the NCAA in passing right now. I don't believe that the Colorado offense is a gimmick. I really just think that he's that good. And I thought they would put up a little bit more of a fight. But this Tennessee team, I'm still high on. The 2-run right now, they struggled against UTEP and another team they played. I mean, they blew them out, but you expected a larger margin than what they beat those teams by. But I tell Florida fans, I said, you guys don't have a good offense, so it's no use of talking about the loss to West Virginia because you guys don't have the offense that West Virginia has. You guys are abysmal offense. You guys are near the bottom of college football and offense. Now, I believe the only way Tennessee loses this game is if they turn the ball over. That's the one thing they can't do. This Florida defense, the secondary led by Chauncey Gardner, who is also, I think he's either the second or best safety prospect going into the NFL draft next year or in 2019. So the secondary is pretty much on lock. But this Florida defense, you cannot turn the ball over against this Florida team. They are very, very good at creating turnovers. And even if you turn the ball over, I don't think Florida's offense will be able to capitalize. But the point is, you cannot turn the ball over. If Tennessee is able to, I believe if Tennessee is able to efficiently not turn the ball over and just drive down the field, they can beat this Florida team. Now, their quarterback, I can't even pronounce his name right, but he looked it pretty good to me. I forgot what game it was. They were getting blown out real bad. He came in, and the offense seemed to look a little bit better when he was on the center. And it seems like I'm rambling on, but this Tennessee team is a lot better than what people think. This Tennessee team, I believe, is better than Florida. So just because I believe they have a better offense, I don't think their offensive line is as bad as Florida. That's another issue. Florida, I believe, it's the left tackle position. Dan Mullen has more pressure to replace the starting left tackle right now than he has to replace Felipe and Franks with Tyler Trask, I think his name is. So that's going to be another thing. I think the Tennessee defensive line is better than Florida's offensive line. And I believe Tennessee has a better offense than what Florida has. And that's why I have Tennessee winning this game. This game is going to be very, very boring and uninteresting to watch because points are going to be at a minimum. But Tennessee, if they hold on to the ball, don't turn the ball over, they're going to win because Felipe Franks is going to turn the ball over. I know that for a fact. He's at least going to throw 2 interceptions. And they're going to be very, very critical because in games like this, it's about field position. Now, if you are able to control the field position, you should be able to have a pretty solid game on offense if you're in great field position. So that I have Tennessee winning. I don't really know my score, but I'm just going to say something like 20 to 14.
20 to 14, Tennessee wins at home against Florida. Low scoring game, but yeah, that's about sounds right. Sounds right in terms of a score. I don't necessarily know. I haven't decided who's going to win the game. I think Florida's a little bit better, but not by much. And they've got to go on the road at Tennessee. But yeah, score in the high teens to 20 range sounds definitely where those teams are headed.
it's just that I know Tennessee lost to West Virginia, but it's some positives from that game. At the beginning, the game was close. Tennessee's defense was looking very, very good, but then West Virginia just started going off, and I expected that because they had Will Greer. He's not one of the best quarterback prospects. He's okay, but he still has a lot of things to work on. This question about his arm strength. He's like a Matt Reiner. Like he's good at leading. He's good at they call it. I forgot what kind of passing they call it. Like he doesn't have a good arm, but he's like very, very good at anticipating routes by wide receivers. I forgot what kind of passing they call it. It's gonna come to me, but
you have to throw to a spot. Sure.
Yes, that's it. That's what they call them. So that's how I feel. And I want to talk about this Texas A&M versus Alabama game.
Yep.
Is that Alabama? A lot of people have Texas A&M pulling off the upset just because of what they did against Clemson. I'm not one of those people. Now I will keep the game on the upset watch, but I'm not going to call it the ups because gonna be a close game. And when you saw the first 2 minutes, you was like, okay, Ole Miss scored, Alabama scored. It's gonna be a good game. Well, everybody was wrong because Alabama busted that game wide open. And this Alabama team was just what we expected it to be if Tua Tagovailoa was the quarterback, unstoppable, and that's what it is. And Texas A&M is going to have a tough time stopping this Alabama offense. Now, the Clemson game, I believe that the Clemson game, they were switching quarterbacks. They kept on going between Kelly Bryant, and I feel that kind of messed up the momentum a little bit. And the Texas A&M defense was really, really getting shredded by Clemson in the first half. In the fourth quarter, something told me, Mark, I know you get this feeling ever since Atlanta, I know this is NFL related, but ever since Atlanta choked that game against the Super Bowl, it seems like every team just comes back. Every team is just coming back now ever since that. And I know I'm not the only one. I know you probably get it's like a sense, you just have a sense. You're like, this team is gonna come back. Watch them come back. I had it against I had it last year against it was UCLA versus Texas A&M, and Josh Rosen just went in complete goat mode in the second half. And I believe that's what happened to the Texas A&M team. They were at home. I believe they really, really got screwed on that touchdown. It was really a touchdown, but when he was diving for the ball, when he was diving over the pylon, the ball had got it. When you dive, you extend your arms out. The ball got knocked out, and it went out of bounds. But the referees thought that it went over the pylon and it went outside of the end zone. And if that happens, that was ruled a touchback. I really believe that was a touchdown, and that was a critical game. But if Texas A&M wants to beat this Alabama team, Kellen Mond has to be Johnny Manziel or better, because Alabama, one thing that they do struggle with, the weakness is that they have a tough time stopping quarterbacks that are able to extend the plays or they're able to move around in the pocket. They struggled against Deshaun Watson. They very, very struggled against Johnny Manziel. Even though the second time they played, the first time Texas A&M played Alabama with Johnny Manziel was the blueprint to how to beat this Alabama team. And I believe Texas A&M is a no-huddle team. I believe, and Nick Saban has struggled a lot against no-huddle teams. I believe he's even spoke out against trying to get the no-huddle there from college football. He has a very, very strong disliking towards the no-huddle because it tires out his defense. And I don't believe that this is I think this is probably the worst Alabama defensive line I have seen the past 4 years. I don't think this is the best, and I think it's going to show. But overall, I believe that Alabama is going to win this game 38-27. Everybody else thinks that Texas A&M is going to get blown out of the water. I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. Texas A&M is going to get blown out of the water.
You think they are?
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't seen Alabama have to play a complete game. We haven't had to. They've been so good, so dominant. They've only had to play like a first quarter against these teams. They could have scored 80 points last week easily.
But this is Texas A&M though. That's all.
I understand that Texas A&M's better, so it's not going to be 80. It's going to be 45 legitimately. Because Alabama will need to keep they won't need to keep scoring. They'll have a comfortable lead. They're going to win this game by 25 points, 30 points.
Whoa. That's what the spread has too, I believe.
I think I'm going to say 45-17.
I know Alabama has been destroying teams, but this Texas A&M team against Clemson, like. The Clemson defense probably has the best defense line in all of college football.
Yep, they do.
It's no argument.
Yep.
And Texas A&M in that fourth quarter absolutely got that defense gassed. And
yep,
Kellen Mond had a very, very good game against that Clemson defense. And you don't think they will be able to replicate that? You believe that performance was a fluke?
No, I don't think it was a fluke. I think he was playing his A game. So that was Texas A&M playing an A game and Clemson maybe playing a C. It was also in Kyle Field. That team is going to be a different team on the road. And Kellen Mond played out of his mind. He's capable of doing that, but he's not going to be doing that all the time. And Clemson could not take advantage of Texas A&M's. I'm sorry, Clemson could not take advantage of Texas A&M's secondary like Tua is going to be able to.
That was my concern too. That was a big concern of mine. And I know for a fact they're 94th in passing yards allowed, and that's very, very scary to me.
Yeah, I just I think Texas A&M. Obviously, I think Jimbo Fisher is recruited extremely well, which is obviously going to pay off next year and the year after, and so forth and so on. And even the Sumlin roster that he's left, it's very good. But they're like a top 20 or 25 team. And Alabama right now is the best team in the country. I just think they're going to really send a message. And, 45-17, that game could be 20-10 at half or 17-10 at half. It could be a decent game for a long time. I'm not saying Alabama's going to come out like they have against Louisville and Ole Miss, and it's going to be 28-0 in the first quarter. Or that type of lead, that they just blow them out from the opening kickoff. Obviously, they gave up the quick 7 to Ole Miss, but then, within 10 minutes of game time, it's already like 28-7 Alabama. I'm not saying that. It's going to take a little bit more time. There's a lot of time to score.
You were able to gas the hearts of a lot of Texas A&M fans there.
Well, they don't need to believe me. We'll watch the game and see what happens. But that's what I'm seeing.
And I got 2 more takes. I want to talk about Ohio State and TCU. What both teams are most likely to go through from now. Ohio State, the Ohio State and TCU game was a very, very entertaining game to me. And TCU surprised a lot of people because a lot of people I thought it was going to be a blowout. I thought Ohio State was just going to obliterate TCU, but Ohio State's offense, the TCU defense really, really dominated the Ohio State offense the entire first half. I believe the only reason Ohio State scored was because of the I think it was the Nick Bosa force. It was something. I believe was it a block punt? Was it a special teams play? They recovered a block punt for a touchdown, or like did somebody have interception? I believe it was a defensive lineman for Ohio State.
Okay, we're talking about in the first half. We're talking about in the first half, right? It was a strip sack at the goal line.
Yeah.
Bosa made a strip sack. Yep.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the TCU defense played out of their freaking mind that game. That was a masterful performance by that TCU defense, not allowing the Ohio State offense to touchdown that whole first half. And I believe for the first 3 quarters, TCU was looking like the better football team, but eventually Ohio State just Dwayne had. That was my first time. That was the first game I ever seen Dwayne Haskins play. And boy, the way he throws the ball is just so. He doesn't throw like how Tua throws it, but he throws it very, very impressively. And I was very, very impressed by his performance, needless to say. Because that TCU defense was really, really coming on the first 3 quarters. And then Ohio State just started going off. I believe TCU had all the momentum. And the way that Ohio State was able to overcome that, because the TCU running back had that 93-yard touchdown. I know Ohio State fans had to be a little nervous. Were you a little nervous, Mark? I know you had to be a little bit on the edge. The way I know you were surprised about how TCU came out. You had to be.
Okay, let me remind you, Big Papi. This is on record. This was on tape and in live stream and recorded and so forth. My final score was Ohio State 38, TCU 28.
So you had it a close game.
I won money on TCU in the points. I took TCU in 13 points.
I didn't think that the TCU defense was going to be that good based on what happens every time people hype up this TCU defense. Like, they hyped them up against Oklahoma and they got shredded. And this offense I wasn't really sold on. I knew about Sean Robinson, but I really haven't saw any film on him. So that was my first time watching him play. But they impressed me. I thought it was going to blow. I thought it was going to be Ohio State 45. Tate Martell gets in the 4th quarter, and they just run the clock out. But the game was very, very close to me. But my last 2 takes is,
all right, Big Papi. You get a lot of airtime here. One more, quick.
Who do you think right now? What is your college football playoff as right now? If the college football season was to start today, who do you think will get in?
Oh, who would get in? Well, we don't know. There's like 800 3-0 teams.
But if it was based on the dominant performances you have saw right now, who do you think will get in? I would have Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Well, Ohio State. But if you had to take away those one SEC team, I have Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, and Oklahoma.
Okay. I think the 4 best teams in the country are the same 4 teams that I picked at the beginning of the season. I'll stay with my prediction. Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. That's who I had in the college football playoff before the season started, and I'll stay with that. No reason to change.
And I agree.
Those aren't my 4 top teams in the country. My 4 top teams in the country right now are LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Georgia, based on how they've played and the results, the resume.
I can't disagree with those. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Thanks, Big Papi.
You like always.
I appreciate the support, man, and everybody. Big Papi's got a channel. Join him at Big Papi JT. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.
All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we have on the line? Bash Gaming.
Yep.
All right.
So, you hit it on the spot with Alabama and Texas A&M. I don't think Texas A&M is going to play like that every game.
No, they played out of their minds.
They did. They absolutely did. And I also think Clemson's secondary is not as good as Alabama's secondary is. So, something to watch for there, I think. Around the line that Vegas is putting out there right now, let me look at it, as a matter of fact.
And Bash.
It was like 26.
Bash, as you well know, Alabama scoring 62 against Ole Miss and scoring 51 against Louisville. They could have scored a whole lot more.
Oh, yeah.
They were laying off the throttle the whole second half in those games.
Yeah. The line right now is Bama by 26, which I I would probably take Bama by 4 touchdowns right now. Let's go right now, 49-21. That would be my pick right now.
So, yeah, I will probably stay away from – I'll have to make a pick on that game because I pick all the games. But in terms of, being some kind of a confidence pick, I would stay away from that. I think that's right on the border.
I definitely would be because Vegas hit that right on the money with the spread, in my opinion. All right, so I got a top 25. Do you want me to do a quick Mark Rogers type rundown of my top 25 or go top 10 in depth?
Well, Bash, anytime you can do anything in my footsteps, of course, that's very much encouraged. If you could do anything modeling me, you do whatever you'd like. Well, you do whatever you'd like.
I'll go ahead and do that. So my criteria right now, it's a little bit different than it would be in the end of the season. I think me and you would meet in the middle when it comes to later in the season when it's all said and done.
Okay.
Right now, I base it off of who you've beaten, but you also got to go with some of the preseason anticipation for teams to me, and you also got to go with how they look on the field right now because there's not enough of a full body of work for these teams.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I rank this one and how I think teams are mainly doing this season so far. So number 25, I got Boston College. Number 24, I got Miami. Number 23, Michigan State. 22, Oklahoma State. 21, Wisconsin. 20, Texas A&M. 19, Michigan. 18, UCF. 17, Oregon. 16, Notre Dame. 15, Iowa. 14, TCU. 13, Virginia Tech. 12, Auburn. And this is going to get a little bit of people. 12, Auburn. 11, West Virginia. 10, Stanford. 9, Washington, 8, Penn State, 7, Mississippi State. That's another shocker right there. 6, LSU, 5, Clemson, 4, Oklahoma, 3, Ohio State, 2, Georgia, 1, Alabama. Teams I considered that are on the outside is in this order: Kentucky, North Carolina State, San Diego State, Arizona State, Duke, and BYU.
So when I've got the big production team around me, we'll be able to spit that out and be able to build you a big graphic with your top 25 as you're speaking, Bash. We'll get to that, at a later date. We can't do that right now. So let me clarify something. Did you actually select and place Washington ahead of Auburn?
Yes, I did. And let me tell you that I'm glad you said that. And let me tell you why I did that.
I disagree with it, but I respect it. Go ahead.
In that game, I felt like it was kind of a 50-50 game that was Washington's for the taking. Granted, Auburn won on the field. I do factor in that it was, for the most part, a home game for Auburn. Even though they're going to call it neutral site, it was in Atlanta. That's not that far from Auburn, Alabama versus Seattle, Washington. So I kind of give it a little bit of a favorite there. And the fact that Auburn could have easily lost that game. Washington, it was theirs for the taking. A couple of mistakes, and I also was kind of, I felt a little more confidence about this after I saw what Washington did with Utah. That defense looked tremendous, and the offense was a different story. But I knew Utah's defense was going to be really good, so I'm not too worried about that offensively for Washington. But that defense for Washington, how they held Utah from, when Utah had a chance to get back in that game over and over and over again, how they kept Utah out of that ball game and really giving them no shot, very impressed with Washington. And that line between Washington and Auburn is not as close, but I favor Washington a little bit based on what I saw this past Saturday, based on a little bit of preseason anticipation. Washington got a little more, in my opinion, and finally, based on that game being more of a toss-up, Auburn winning basically at home. Keep in mind last year, and this has nothing to do with these rankings, but last year, Auburn beat Georgia in a home game. Flip it to what was more of a neutral site than Washington and Auburn, but flip it to a neutral site, Georgia controlled the game thoroughly against Auburn and beat Auburn a year ago. So sometimes the best teams don't win.
Okay, so I don't agree because I do it a different way, as you well know. So I don't agree, but I respect it because you're clearly stating and holding to your logic. And your logic is these are just the teams I believe are the best, 25 up to all the way up to number 1. So take, for example, let's say this happened. A couple of years ago, we know that Pitt beat Clemson. What if that game would have been played the very first week of the season? Pitt goes down to Clemson and they beat Clemson. And everybody in College Football Nation saying, well, we know Clemson's still better. And in my rankings, of course, Pitt might be number 1 in the country in week 2 because that's how I do it. It's a resume ranking. But I would clearly say I believe Clemson, if they played 50 more times, Clemson's going to beat them 48 or 49 out of 50 times. But it just didn't happen. But we all understand, okay, they're going to play out a season and Pitt's going to go 7-5 and Clemson's going to go 11-1. So we know Clemson's better. We know it. But what was displayed on the field is that Pitt won the game, so they should be rewarded for that. So I respect going either direction on that, Bash, in regards to rankings. I can totally get your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, so that also based a little bit off of the win Washington had against Utah. To me, I value Utah pretty highly. I think they're on that next level down behind the first 6 out. I think they're at the next level with Cal and throwing a couple teams there.
First 6 out of what? First 6 out of the playoff?
Oh no, okay. I had first 6 out of the top 25.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Utah's a top 30
right
team.
Level,
Utah's a top 30 team. Got it. Yeah, I'm with you.
They're at least top 40.
Sure.
Last
point here, Bash.
Yeah, of course. An example of that I have is Notre Dame. I have 16, Michigan 19. I think Michigan's better, but Michigan hasn't beat anyone yet versus Washington, who did beat someone yet, and I can kind of validate that, hey, look, I can make a good case that Washington's better. But Notre Dame beating Vanderbilt and Michigan, both, granted, both at home, I think that Michigan is a better team. They're going to be ranked a little lower, though, just because they haven't played anyone. Make sense?
Makes sense, Bash. You lost me somewhere in amongst some of that, but I'm with you. I got your logic. You are rating the teams based on who you believe is better. I'm basing it on a resume. It's just 2 different ways to attack it. Just as long as you're consistent, that's the thing. Yep. You just have to be consistent with that.
Can I take 1 more minute? I'm watching the clock right now.
You can take about 12 seconds.
All right.
What you got?
So spread picks this week. I'm 12-3 this season. Spread picks. I got UCF up 13.5 right now. West Virginia 14.5. I got Georgia Tech covering the 16.5 against Clemson. That Clemson's favored. Mississippi State covering the 11.5 that they are favored, and Arizona State covering the 18.5 that Washington's favored is what I got. I'll see you later, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, Bash. Appreciate it. Bash Gaming, man, taking over the show. All right. Appreciate you guys jumping on the line. We will cease the phone calls right now, but certainly call us in just a few minutes. But for the next several, we're going to talk to Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC. You can also hear him on the pregame show for all Virginia Tech football games at ESPN Blacksburg. Mike, how you doing tonight?
What's going on? How's it going?
Oh, we have Mike with us. Mike, let's give it one more try. Maybe that was me.
How's it going?
There he is.
There I am.
We're doing just fine.
Nice.
What's going on this fine evening?
Hey, it's a Wednesday night. We're on to week 4, Mark. Some exciting football so far. Not a great weekend for the ACC, I'd say.
Or the Big Ten.
Or the Big Ten. Yeah. Big Ten had a worse weekend somehow. They found a way.
Yeah, they at least had their banner team pull one out on Saturday night. Otherwise, it would have been an utter cataclysmic disaster.
And that game didn't look good for a while either, Mark.
No, TCU played extremely well and ran them around the field for quite a long time before. Really, the difference between the two teams is that Ohio State's a lot deeper, and that defensive line just wrecked.
More firepower, too, on
TCU's offensive line. Yeah. Yep. Now, let's look at the ACC. I got to take this because the talk on late Saturday night into Sunday was the Big Ten, the Big Ten, the Big Ten. I didn't hear any really comments made about criticism of the ACC's performance. So let's run it down. We've got, of course, I'm trying to think out of conference games that were lost. Everybody played in conference, didn't they?
Yeah, a lot of people
Generally,
played
in terms of big games.
in terms of big games. Yeah, those were played in conference.
So why down on the ACC? Just beating each other.
Yeah, I'm a little bit down with the ACC. Overall, the way Louisville looked against Western Kentucky wasn't good. You know, we had all the talk about Jawan Pass. First of all, there were a lot of questions about Louisville this year, right? I mean, they were you know, preparing for life without Lamar Jackson. Offensive line's never been good. You're revamping the defense under Brian Van Gorder. There were a lot of questions with Louisville coming into the season, rightfully so. I'm very surprised that Jawan Pass appears to have lost his starting job to Malik Cunningham. The tables have really turned there. Jawan Pass was a 4-star quarterback coming out of high school, supposed to be a next big thing after Lamar Jackson, really didn't pan out. I thought he looked okay overall against Alabama, but okay versus Alabama is still completing about 50% of your passes, and due to general lack of talent around him there at Louisville. He just played okay there in that spot. Louisville won the following week, but didn't look great. Last week, Lamar Jackson goes Jawan Pass goes over 3 with an interception in the week 3 game against Western Kentucky, and then he's ultimately benched for Malik Cunningham. So there's just a lot of questions around Louisville. Yes, they pull out the game against Western Kentucky, but it didn't look good. I was high on Georgia Tech coming into the year, Mark. I thought Georgia Tech had an opportunity to be the second or third best team in the ACC, and maybe they still do, but it's been a really ugly first 3 games. That Paul Johnson option offense looks like it's run a little bit stale, and the defense hasn't gotten a ton better. Linebackers have really struggled. Defensive line's been okay, and they got a relatively young secondary as well, but they were returning a lot of starters on that side of the football. So I thought with a new scheme under Nate Woody, the new defensive coordinator, I thought Georgia Tech had a chance to be pretty good, especially with all the production they were returning on offense with Taquan Marshall. The only problem is they lose in a shootout to South Florida. They lay an egg offensively against Pitt. Yes, they ran for over 300 yards, but they were laboring throughout the entire game. The defense didn't look that great either. So now Georgia Tech staring 1-2 in the face before they even think about playing Clemson this upcoming weekend, which could get ugly in a hurry, even though that game is at home. So Georgia Tech could have 3 losses in the first 4 games. That's not something I was necessarily expecting out of them heading into the year. So that's a little bit disappointing. Clemson's Clemson. I think they're toying with the opponents they're playing with so far. The Texas A&M game in week 2 got a little bit more interesting than it probably had to be, but Clemson was pretty dominant there in the first half. They had a little bit of an issue finishing the drill in that game as Texas A&M made some good halftime adjustments under Jimbo Fisher and got themselves back into the game. I was really impressed with Kellen Mond specifically in the second half because I thought they did a lot of good things around him, trying to get the pocket rolled out to the right or to the left side when he was dropping back to pass instead of doing straight dropbacks, which really hurt them in the first half with that Clemson pass rush. So there were some things that Jimbo Fisher did to neutralize the Clemson defense, which I think can be used by better teams moving forward. Florida State getting drilled by Syracuse too is another one. Syracuse winning that game 30-7 is a shock to me. I actually bet on Florida State, Mark, to win this football game because I thought that despite all the woes they had on offense, I thought, well, Syracuse's defense is so bad. This is a good weekend to get things right, considering, hey, they lose to Virginia Tech. And then the Samford game, yes, it was ugly, but it was on a short week. It was a classic. You get up for Virginia Tech, you lose that game, and it's the classic, okay, we're playing Samford, let's chill out this week. And they looked bad up until about the 4-minute mark in the fourth quarter, then they turned it on. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, Florida State's playing Syracuse. This could launch them off for the rest of the season because Syracuse's defense is absolutely atrocious. They played poorly in the opener against Western Michigan. The second game of the year was against an FCS opponent, so it doesn't really matter. But then you get to week 3 and you're playing Florida State, and you're thinking, okay, well, Syracuse's defense, time to regress back to the mean. And it just didn't happen because the Florida State offense literally the offensive line can't block anybody right now. If you have 4 guys with arms and legs on the defensive line, you're probably getting in the backfield to sack DeAndre Francois. I mean, Syracuse's defense is bad, but they have some players that have ACC talent and can get in the backfield. And while the unit isn't all that good, it made Florida State's offense, it really just made a mockery of Florida State's offense. So the Seminoles have been really disappointing under Willie Taggart. There's no 2 ways around it. Hopefully they can turn things around. Those are probably the biggest disappointments in the conference so far. Of course, there were a number of teams that didn't have games this past weekend due to the hurricane. North Carolina, probably better they didn't have a game because they were playing UCF, which could have been ugly. Virginia Tech, really interested to see what we got with the Hokies now, Mark. We're coming into a little bit more of a tougher stretch here after this weekend against Old Dominion. You got Duke, you got Notre Dame coming up. We'll learn a lot more about the Hokies. So, you had their game canceled as well. NC State would have loved to have seen what they could do against West Virginia because West Virginia's offense, we know about Will Greer and how talented he is and the skill position talent they have with David Sills, All-American receiver on the outside. So there are a lot of questions that are still unanswered just because we are, just coming into the fourth week of the season, right? We're only a third of the way through this thing. And we're getting through the non-conference games now that don't matter. I'm talking like the FCS games where you don't really learn a whole lot. And we're going to start to get into conference play where, these teams will start to separate themselves out here towards the middle of the season. We'll really get a good sample size to see what we got here.
You reminded me there that I promised my audience earlier in the week and actually going into last weekend for conference rankings. So I need to work on that. And the reason I typically make this kind of a mile point or a marker in the season is because aside from Notre Dame playing their schedule out against Power 5 opponents, specifically in the ACC for the rest of the season, but Stanford, USC, etc. And besides those ACC-SEC matchups out of the SEC Eastern Division, the final weekend of the season, like 85 to 90% of the non-conference games have been played. So everybody's going to go play in their conferences for the rest of the season for the most part. And basically, this is a good point in the season for me after week 3 to start to size up, okay, what did we learn out of especially the big matchups, but the entirety of these conferences playing each other? If you look at an SEC, an ACC, a Big 10, a Big 12, and a Pac-12, if you look at the breadth of the entire league, they've played about 12 to 15 games against the other 4 conferences. And what do those look like? And in addition to those games against the other Power 4 leagues, the games that were either embarrassments against an FCS school or a bad group of 5, or in the case of an Oklahoma State playing a stellar group of 5, considered to be maybe the best coming into the season in Boise State and really laying down a thumping. And even though that's not credited, of course, as a Power 5 win, that it's the caliber of a top 25 to 30 win. The place where we differ, Mike, and I totally respect your perspective on this because I think it's valid, I just look at it differently, is once the conferences play within the conference, it's difficult for me to rate the conference just based on results because obviously every game is won, every game is lost, every conference plays 500 against itself. But you're looking at it, so I rate it more from the standpoint of how is the league playing against the other leagues versus I totally get your take. You're looking at a Florida State-Syracuse situation in which, unless Syracuse completely blows our minds this year, and that's not going to happen, we know Florida State or Syracuse is going to be a 4 to 6 win team. They're not going to be any. They didn't show us last week that they're going to just trample through the Atlantic Division now. But this does show us Florida State, who we all thought was the 2nd to 4th best team in the league to start the season, might be awful. This is not good for the ACC. So just like the Miami LSU game, even though that's a non-conference game, it showed us that Miami's not quite as good as we thought. And now we don't know what to believe about Virginia Tech. So it's going to be interesting to see the Hokies go out and play a quality foe. So I'll make one other comment concerning this past weekend's results. And you do point out one that kind of slipped by me, even though I knew the score and I saw it on the bottom line. Didn't really look into what happened in the game with Louisville, down 14 to 6 in the fourth quarter at home against Western Kentucky. Just staved off embarrassment there in winning 20 to 17. And you went into the details of the storylines there at quarterback. The game that we were robbed from seeing that I really wanted to see was West Virginia, NC State. That would have been the game, just to match up similar seeded teams from Power 5 leagues. I always love those matchups, and it would have been fun to see Ryan Finley and Will Greer go at it.
Yeah, overall I completely agree with you. The one thing you mentioned, stacking up conference versus non-conference opponents, I think the thing that we were robbed of was seeing maybe one of the best ACC non-conference games of the year when NC State wasn't able to play against West Virginia this past weekend. There were not a lot of high-profile non-conference games for the ACC. Miami LSU obviously was one. Clemson Texas A&M was the other. Outside of that, I mean, we were all really looking forward to seeing NC State and Texas A&M. I think that could have been one of the best college football games of the year, actually. One of those that really flies under the radar for you, but then the game actually happens. You're like, holy crap, it's week 3 and there's a ton of scoring. I don't know what to do. That could have been a really exciting game. Would have felt like a bowl game, in my opinion, just with the different styles of play. Two really, really outstanding quarterbacks going head to head. I think that would have been a great matchup. So it's a bummer we were robbed of that. One team I want to bring up that I haven't brought up yet that I'm very impressed with is Boston College. I think everybody's very impressed with BC. Our buddy Dan Rubin, I had him on my podcast, Basketball Conference podcast, to discuss the Eagles and their win over Wake Forest, their return to a top 25 for the first time in years. And look, I mean, Boston College, we knew they had a great running game with A.J. Dillon. I think what everybody's most impressed with is the fact that the defense has still been about as good or maybe even a little bit worse than it's been in past years, but still a top 10 to 15 unit in the country potentially. And you're coupling that great defense and a great run game with finally a competent quarterback, Mark. Anthony Brown has been outstanding at quarterback for BC. Throws 5 touchdown passes against Wake Forest. Really was curious to see how he'd play against Wake, because a lot of Anthony Brown's success last year, while he was garnering some hype before he got hurt, a lot of his success came against non-conference opponents, didn't come against teams in the ACC. For Anthony Brown to come out against, albeit a mediocre Wake Forest defense, but not to take anything away, he goes for 300 yards and 5 touchdown passes. This is an electric offense right now, Mark. You're finally coupling a very good defense with not only a solid running game, but outstanding quarterback play. And I'll tell you what, the sky's the limit for Boston College here in the ACC this year. This is a team that I was pretty high on, but then when taking a look at the schedule, I tempered expectations a little bit. I picked them to finish 7-5. Now, if they go 7-5, in my opinion, it's a disappointment with how they've looked on offense so far. This is a really solid unit. A team that's going to lose a game or two this year, and probably to a good team like Clemson. But I think they can go potentially into Blacksburg, beat a team like Virginia Tech. I certainly think Boston College will beat Louisville. There are a lot of games on BC's schedule that perhaps I looked at the beginning of the year and wasn't completely sure about, that now I look at as very winnable games, and games that, look, if BC's playing this well on both sides of the football, they can certainly upset a very good team come ACC play.
So like you, I talked to Dan Rubin right after the game. He came on to do some instant analysis. I was at the mothership there, the worldwide leader. The mothership, as Dan Patrick likes to call it. But as you know, of course, they moved up the game from an 8 o'clock start, 7:45, something in that range, to 5:30 Eastern time. So by the time I got home and I had obligations here, I DVR'd the game, but you know how that works. So I really wanted to take in this game, and I saw it in bits and pieces. But really didn't get to sit down and watch it, looked at the numbers, got the analysis from Dan. So you're not concerned with the BC defense. And the one caveat there is they did give up like 2 big special teams plays, had 2 big special teams blunders that made the 34 points that Wake scored seem to be bigger of an offensive showcase or a defensive letdown for BC than it actually was, from what I understand.
Yeah, and Cade Carney and Matt Colburn from Wake Forest, they both ran for over 100 yards, but the BC defense was on the field something like 110 plays in this football game. I mean, the defense was on the field a ton. So when looking at the numbers offensively for Wake Forest, you can kind of temper them a little bit. It's actually a question that I had for Dan when he was on the podcast with Joey Weaver and I. It was, hey, are you concerned at all about the Wake Forest defense or the Boston College defense giving up over 200 yards rushing to Wake Forest? And his answer was no, just because of the number of plays that they were on the field for and how they played overall. Connor Strahan had something like 13 or 14 tackles in the football game. I mean, he was all over the field. So Dan wasn't too concerned about the BC defense. And overall, I mean, why would we be concerned? Boston College's defense has held up quite nicely here over the last few years. If there's one thing that's been a given with BC, it's been that their defense is good. Sometimes to a top 3 to 5 level good nationally. Not sure that they're that good this year, but I still think they're very talented. And certainly with the quarterback play they're getting right now, they don't have to be a top 3 or 5 unit to be one of the better teams in the country.
It was interesting because the big contrast that I made was obviously that the game that really sticks in my mind. This was back in 2015, just to show where these programs have come and the development Steve Adazio has accomplished there at Boston College, and we saw it coming more gradually with Dave Clawson doing a fantastic job there at Wake, as he has at a few other stops. In that these two teams played. This was only 3 years ago. They played a 3-0 game at Wake, and it wasn't great defense. Maybe on BC's side, it was great defense because they were really good the entire year. But it was basically just atrocious offense. The offensive lines were garbage. They had no playmakers, no speed, no nothing, no quarterback play, nothing. And to see what Wake was able to pull off last year, scoring 55 points against an SEC team in a bowl game, and have one of the top 15 pass efficiency offenses in the nation, with John Wolfer throwing 29 or 30 touchdowns. And now BC, I don't think that they've completely changed their identity, but at least they can stretch a defense and make them respect A.J. Dillon. It's just, it was fun. The little bit of the game that I got to see, it was fun to see the capable offense.
Yeah, certainly. Capable offense is a good word for it. And you know what? With Wake Forest, too, I'll flip to the other side of the coin here. I've been pretty impressed with Wake, Mark. I didn't know really what to expect coming into the year because they obviously lost some talent on defense. Greg Dortch was returning at receiver, which is good news for everybody, right? But the Wake Forest offense, despite not having Kendall Hinton, the quarterback for the first 3 games of the year, has looked pretty good with freshman Sam Hartman in the game. And there have been some growing pains. I mean, he is a true freshman. He's thrown a couple really bad interceptions. One of note is in the Tulane game in the opener. I couldn't believe he made that throw in the, was it the 3rd or 4th quarter, completely changed the game, and made it a lot more interesting than it probably had to be. But Sam Hartman overall, for a true freshman, taking his lumps here in the early part of the year, thrown into a tough situation there, maybe not as prepared to start as he should have been, has actually been pretty good overall, I think. So Sam Hartman's got a bright future. The Wake Forest coaching staff certainly agrees, as he's still the #1 quarterback with Kendall Hinton returning from suspension. Obviously, they have Matt Colburn, Cade Carney, Greg Dortch at receiver, flies under the radar. He's one of the best receivers in the conference. He's certainly outstanding. And defense, while it's taking a step back, and it's the 2nd straight year it's taken a step back without having Mike Elko, defensive coordinator who went to Notre Dame, is now at A&M with Jimbo Fisher. The defense has looked okay. Certainly an area that we'll have to continue to watch for Wake Forest, but I think this is a team that's certainly going to live up to expectations, sitting in the 6 or 7 win range, which is good because we weren't necessarily sure how they were going to hold up here in the first quarter of the season without Kendall Hinton. But it turns out that Sam Hartman's been quite good at quarterback, and it'll be interesting to see his development here moving forward throughout the rest of the year, because it does appear that he's going to continue to be a starter.
All right, coming up here in week 4, what do you got your eye on? Maybe not just in the ACC, but across the nation.
Well, I mean, there are certainly a number of games I'll be keeping an eye on this upcoming weekend in the ACC. Georgia Tech Clemson in particular is one game that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. The reason why is because I think Georgia Tech is facing a ton of adversity right now, and rightfully so. You have to wonder how the troops will rally around Paul Johnson. The one worry I have with Georgia Tech in this game, besides just being completely overmatched talent-wise, is the fact that Clemson's defensive line is so good, and they can stop that rushing attack of Georgia Tech. And how does Taquan Marshall hold up throwing the football? Because that's been the real problem for Georgia Tech. Mark, we've talked about this before. When Georgia Tech's offense has been really good in the past, it's when they've been able to run the ball like they usually do, gain 300 to 350 yards per game on the ground, and then have a quarterback who can pull it back and surprise you and throw 5 to 6 passes a game at most, but hit on 3 or 4 of those for big gains and potentially game-changing touchdowns. We haven't seen that with Taquan Marshall, the quarterback position for Georgia Tech, as good as he's been running the ball. He does not have the accuracy at the quarterback position. So how does Georgia Tech adapt to that here in this game against Clemson? Because Clemson's a team that obviously can overpower you up front and cause you to throw the football, which is what I worry about. The line initially opened at 17. I think it's now at 16.5, Mark. Largest spread that Georgia Tech has been an underdog for under Paul Johnson. They have never been an underdog by more than 17 points, which seems crazy. Yeah. I read
they haven't been that good.
Which is pretty astonishing considering some of the teams they've played, especially how good Clemson's been the last couple of years. For example, last year Clemson's team was obviously very good. Georgia Tech was a 13.5 point underdog. They're a much bigger underdog this year by a little more than a field goal. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt. They are at home, so I think that does lend some credence. It'll be interesting to see how they play there. One other game that could get pretty interesting in the ACC this week. It's the premier non-conference game, so to speak, in the ACC this week. Wake Forest hosts Notre Dame at noon. That could get interesting. Brandon Wimbush's issues at quarterback are well documented. Outstanding athlete until he throws the ball, and then all hell breaks loose for the Notre Dame offense. Wake Forest defense, especially against the run, they're middle of the pack. They're, I think, 65th in the country in rushing efficiency defense right now. They're okay. Middle of the pack. If they stop the Notre Dame rushing attack and make Brandon Wimbush throw, this game could get very interesting. I'm not sure if Brandon Wimbush can beat a capable defense with his arm. We're going to find that out shortly. That, obviously Notre Dame has Wake Forest this week, Stanford next week at home. They go to Blacksburg the following week. This is going to be quite the test here for Brandon Wimbush and that Notre Dame offense in the coming weeks. The only problem I have with Wake Forest here that kind of scares me to death is Sam Hartman at quarterback. He's a true freshman. He's made a couple of really boneheaded freshman mistakes for as good as he's been, like I mentioned. A couple of boneheaded mistakes throwing against a really good Notre Dame secondary. That is the concern I have if I'm Wake Forest. Him making that back-breaking mistake this week could be the difference in winning or losing the football game, because I do think Wake Forest can keep this thing close, but whether or not they're able to pull off the upset at home really depends on how Sam Hartman plays against this Notre Dame secondary.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Irish outside of Wimbush here in the first 3 weeks of the season? And I don't know that we can take a whole lot from Ball State. Some people have in regards to just winning by whatever it was, 16 points, 8 points, whatever it was. I don't remember the final. Anyway, something in that range, a lot lower than the 34-point spread. I definitely know that. But the other two games in beating what should turn out to be a good Michigan team, they have yet to beat anyone, but they'll be really good in the top 15. And Vandy last week, who certainly was game. If the kid pulls down Lipscomb, the pass at the 10-yard line, wow, it's really dicey for the Irish at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Notre Dame, it's good that you're surviving and advancing, but there are some obvious questions with this football team right now, and chief among them is the passing game. The offensive line has just been okay, but when you lose Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson at the NFL draft, you do have to replace some talent there. It's a given that the offensive line is going to take at least a little bit of a step back when you have two All-Americans go in the first round of the draft. It's obvious that they were going to take a little bit of a step back up front, and the offensive line's been okay. Brandon Wimbush hasn't really improved as a passer. That's the problem. And Notre Dame's defense, very good. I think the rushing attack is very good. Tony Jones has been very good in the backfield. This is a solid Notre Dame team, a 9 or 10 win team. Whether or not they make the next step into a potential dark horse for the playoff depends on Brandon Wimbush and his ability to beat good teams with his arm. We're going to find out a lot about Wimbush and the Irish the next 3 weeks. This Wake Forest game is tough because Notre Dame's got, first of all, Wake Forest is very well coached. Let's get that out of the way first. I do think they have a very capable team in the ACC's Atlantic Division. Highlighted that at length. Dave Clawson's done an excellent job there. It's a tough game in and of itself, but then when you consider it's a little bit of a look-ahead spot with as well as Stanford has played here in the first few weeks of the year, a tough game facing them in South Bend. They got Virginia Tech the following week going to Blacksburg. We'll find out how good Virginia Tech is in the coming weeks as well. This is a Notre Dame team that is going to be made or broken by the next 3 or 4 weeks of the year. They have a tough schedule, not impossible if they can weather this storm. Certainly they'll be in the conversation for the college football playoff if they get through this next month unscathed. They'll definitely be in the mix, but there are certainly some questions. I think there are some defenses here the next few weeks, particularly in Stanford and potentially against Virginia Tech, although the defense is very young and looked good against Florida State. Take that for what it's worth. When you go to Blacksburg and play, it's a very tough environment anyway. You get a young defense that can make a couple plays. If they can stimulate the run and make Brandon Wimbush throw, that could be a difficult game for the Irish down there in Blacksburg. So keep an eye on the next few weeks for Notre Dame. this is when we'll really learn a lot about this team. But the passing attack is really what's in question, I think, overall for them.
We've got Mike McDaniel on the line from inside the ACC, also ESPN Blacksburg. Mike, this is always something that I look at in regards to setting up myself if nothing else is going on for a college football Saturday, and it starts at noon Eastern time, and that's making the selection of my games, my number one game, my secondary game, in case the first one's 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, and how am I going to play this? Because there's always like 4 games going on at the same time that I'm interested in. And there aren't any just massive games on at noon, but you got Georgia, Missouri, Notre Dame, Wake Forest. I'm going to be very interested in Michigan, Nebraska, Boston College at Purdue. I understand the Boilers are 0-3, but they just took Mizzou to the wire. They've lost 3 games by that much. And Boston College could be in for a difficult time there. Not that they're going to lose, or not that they can't lose, but when I say difficult time, it could be another dicey game right there with Purdue. And so there's about 4 games stacked there at noon, and then it proceeds throughout the day in terms of me wrestling, trying to be able to watch like 50 games at the same time.
Yeah, I mean that's
always
me.
Tough.
That's me in a nutshell. The 3:30 window this past weekend. With LSU Auburn, and obviously I had my eye on Notre Dame Vanderbilt. Growing up a Notre Dame fan, had an eye on that game. Boise State Oklahoma State, which got a little bit more out of hand than I expected it to. That was the 3rd game on, but there are a lot of very good games this past weekend that you were juggling, especially in that 2 o'clock to 3:30 window, where I mean you're watching some pretty solid football teams play. Really impressed with Vanderbilt. Kyle Shermer. I mean, if you haven't, I know you're aware of how good he is, Mark, but a lot of people aren't. Like, Kyle Shermer is the real deal. A lot of them a lot of people just know of him as Pat Shermer's son, because Pat Shermer coaches the Giants now. Kyle Shermer can really play. He's going to be an NFL quarterback, no doubt about it. He's got the pedigree, gets the ball out quick, makes smart decisions for the most part. Made one mistake against Notre Dame, but makes very smart decisions with the football. Mechanics are sound. I mean, this kid's going to be very good. I'm very high on him when watching him against a very talented Notre Dame defense. Looking like nationally, just at some of the other games outside of the ACC, I mentioned Oklahoma State, Boise State. That Oklahoma State defense, I'll tell you what, if they continue on the trajectory they're on, that team's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12. Oklahoma's stealing all the highlights right now, rightfully so. Kyler Murray's been phenomenal, but Oklahoma State's defense, I'll tell you what, if they get that unit rolling, this offense, we know this offense can score. And if this defense is anywhere near as good as they've been so far, this could be a team that could push for a college football playoff out of the Big 12. I mean, I think they are that talented, especially if they keep things going on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, they're an interesting story because they've elevated in the last 10 to 12 years to that second tier of teams, to that top 15 to 20 teams in the nation. They've elevated to them, to that Virginia Tech line, to that Tennessee, what used to be a Tennessee line, not quite to the elite of college football, but a very good program. And then last year was supposed to be their breakout year, supposed to be, okay, they can really challenge Oklahoma. Mason Rudolph's in his final season, James Washington, all these stars that they had. And they let down in the big games. And we've seen it throughout the course of recent college football history that sometimes other parts on the teams are ready and the roster's ready elsewhere. And so they lose stars. And Oklahoma State was not talked about by anybody coming into the season as being any kind of contender. In the Big 12, it was all about Oklahoma, of course, but it was about Will Grier being the only known commodity at quarterback coming back. And, of course, TCU had a nice season last year, so there was some play about them. And, of course, Texas, when are they going to break out? Is this going to be the year? There was nothing about Oklahoma State, and all we knew is that they had this wild, 4 or 5 man quarterback battle, and one of them involved the Hawaii transfer, Drew Brown. Now this kid that's been in the system and on campus forever, Taylor Cornelius, he gets the job, and they got something going here, and they win the big game against Boise State.
Yeah, and like you said, it's been a roller coaster ride. We'll have to see how this team continues to respond, especially in the big games, like you mentioned. That's the one question with Oklahoma State. Can they win in the big games? And it's kind of been a roller coaster under Mike Gundy. Cornelius has been outstanding. I mean, he's the real deal, can really sling it around. This is just a team that I think a lot of people were sleeping on in the Big 12. You know, there were a lot of people who thought that Oklahoma State could be good, but the question was the defense. And right now they look like they may have the best defense in the Big 12. I thought that title might have belonged to TCU. And then I watched TCU against Ohio State, especially in the second half. And I'm sitting there wondering what the hell they're doing. It's one of those things where you play in the Big 12. It's bend, and then you finally break. I'm not sure this Oklahoma State defense fits in that traditional mold of the Big 12 defenses that we've seen here in recent years.
Mike McDaniel, inside the ACC, also ESPN Blacksburg, and helps us out here on a regular basis here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, Mike, enjoy the games this weekend. You've got your assignment on Saturday morning, I suspect.
I do. Yeah, I'll actually, even though it's a road game, I will be down in Blacksburg this weekend. Long story, was on business travel. My car is still in Blacksburg from a couple of weeks ago. I left Virginia Tech and went to New York for business, then Los Angeles, and then tried to fly back into Charlotte to then connect into Roanoke, which is right near Blacksburg. Couldn't do it because of the hurricane. So I'll be heading down there to get my car and, of course, do the pregame show on Saturday morning.
Oh, wow. That's a little roundabout trip back to the old stomping grounds.
Little bit, but at least I'll have my car finally. So that'll make things a little bit easier as far as getting to and from work.
Yeah, you kind of take those things for granted every so often, but we kind of need those in this day and age.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, have a great night. Appreciate you jumping on at the last second. I just reached out to Mike, said, hey, we're going live. We're just talking college football, and he was kind enough to jump on board.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thanks.
Mike McDaniel, inside the ACC and also ESPN Blacksburg. You can join him on Twitter at Mike McDaniel CFB. Mike McDaniel CFB. I'm going to hang on the line for a little bit longer and see what you guys are talking about. I suspect college football. I believe there's some Pac-12 expansion talk from what I see on the live chat. Who knows what you guys are kicking around, trying to fit more teams into these conferences. You understand, if you fit more teams into the conferences, and then the conferences are even bigger, and therefore there are more games that aren't being played inside the conference that would be instrumental toward determining the best team in the conference. So keep that in mind. I did release a video. Oh boy, this was about 2 years ago, I would suspect, in which I set up college football the way I would set it up. And basically what I did was I took Notre Dame and I put them in the Big Ten. And I also took some other teams out of the Big Ten. And I finished up with 12 teams in the Big Ten. So I took out, I took out 3, Rutgers, Maryland, and Penn State. Sorry, Penn State, which took me to 11 in the Big Ten. And then I added Notre Dame, and I had 12 in the Big Ten. I had 12 in every conference. We had uniformity. We had 6 12-team conferences. The SEC was easy. I took out Texas A&M and Mizzou. I sent them to the Big 12, back to the Big 12 where you belong. And then with the ACC, I took out some of those Eastern teams, Northeastern teams like Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt. I sent them back up Louisville to the Big East, and I reformed the Big East, and I tried to bulk it up with Louisville and Penn State. It also had Pitt and Boston College and Syracuse, and the service academies went that direction. It was a nice little league up there in the Northeast. And then I filled out the ACC with South Florida and Central Florida. They would be nice additions to the ACC, and I had 12 teams in the ACC. Then out west in the Pac-12, I'm trying to remember what I did, but yes, we had 12-team leagues all over the place, and it looked good, and it made sense. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm going to take a word from George concerning the likes. I got 29 likes, and I got 28 people watching. Obviously, that's just 28 people watching right this second. As soon as I shut this down, I'm going to guess I've got about 300 views right now and only 29 likes. I would like to get more likes. Not that I've got an inferiority complex, or maybe I do. It just helps drive the channel. All right, so what else is on my list to talk about here? We went through the top 25. You guys chimed in with your top 25s. Remind you that we've got a newsletter that we release each and every Monday. Our list is up to about 65 on the mailing list. It is our newsletter, The Voice of College Football. It comes out every Monday. And what you get is you get a channel update, our thoughts about the channel, what's on the channel, what's coming up that week, our vision. More of that's going to be coming and revealed in the future, our vision for the channel. My take on the previous weekend, which centered on the success of the SEC this past weekend. And then the most popular of the sections in the Voice of College Football, that would be the stats, the trends, and the facts, in which I collected those from all the games over the weekend and give you some interesting tidbits, facts, stats, trends, historic, landmark statistics, things that happened over the weekend that hadn't happened in forever. And we release that to you each and every Monday. All you need to do is send me your email. As long as I've got your email, you send it to MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and you've got my email address, so that's a fair swap. And I get you the newsletter each and every week. I will not clutter up your inbox. This will be the one mailing you will receive from me each and every week. Please shop at Amazon. And when you do, I'm really not selling you on shopping on Amazon, but people already do. So if you shop on Amazon, or people that you associate yourself with, your friends, your family, your significant other, shop on Amazon, buy whatever you typically do. You don't need to buy anything from me or for me. The only thing that you need to do is grab one of the links down in the description section of any video. Take any of my videos and go down into the description section, grab the link, and just enter Amazon using that link, and that will help us out significantly. All right, I released my Texas TCU prediction. Got much feedback on that. I hope to do many more predictions throughout this week. I've got to send you my predictions as well, the entire week's games. But in terms of a preview and prediction, we released TCU and Texas earlier today. We've got more coming up. Alabama, Texas A&M, Oregon, Stanford. I will preview and predict as many games as possible. Live stream tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, talking all the big games in Week 4. Anything else you guys would like to hit on? Friday morning at 11:45 Eastern Time, I will have Steve Merrill on from Pro Sports Info, and the most fascinating conversations that you're going to find on betting angles, specifically the Week 4 games, but also just in general. I hit up Steve with all sorts of crazy notions that I have about betting and beating Vegas, and he tells me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, or if I've got a little bit of sense or none at all. And it's always a great conversation that I look forward to with Steve Merrill each and every week. 11:45 Eastern Time is the live chat. Of course, you can catch it if you're at work or doing something else at that point. You can catch it later in the day. But if you want to join the live chat, it's at 11:45 Eastern Time on a Friday morning. All right. Also, let's keep in mind that I need to gauge a few other things. 288028, new college football commissioner. I'm glad I caught that on the chat. How do I work that into the title? We already have Voice of College Football, new college football commissioner. Somebody brought it up earlier. It might have been, I think it was Clemson alum. Who do I add to the, if I had one more light, I really need another light. I should bring a light back here and shine that up a little bit better than I do. But we'll get to that at some point and even out the lighting. It's difficult to tell during the night. During the day, it's a little bit different back here since I have the beautiful French doors. I had to have somebody tell me they were French doors. Tennessee, Alabama, Washington displayed on the top tier, and then we've got Ole Miss, Ohio State, and Clemson on the bottom tier. So we've got 6 helmets. I have explained in the past why those 6, and if you'd like to know, I will tell you again sometime. All right, Clemson alum threw it out and said, if Mark got 2 more helmets, who would he get? And I responded, and I think I completely agreed with Clemson alum, and I don't know that he's still on the chat. But I agreed with Clemson alum. I said, well, if it had to do with this season, the two most likely candidates to clearly and most significantly represent the prominent programs right now, I would get Georgia and I would get Oklahoma. With apologies to Notre Dame, with apologies to Washington. I got Washington, with apologies to Stanford, with apologies to LSU. Oklahoma and Georgia would be the two helmets I would get. Now, if we're talking college football history and the schools that I need to get, probably USC and Notre Dame, or Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, Penn State. I need a lot of them. So I need a giant OU fathead of 28, of course. AD, 28, playing with the Redskins right now. I saw him rip off a nice little 13-yard gainer, but then I saw his stats, 10 carries, 16 yards, at least at that point in the game. So I think it's coming to an end, unfortunately, for AP in, you can call him AP or AD in the NFL. All right, so this is what I'm throwing out there for anybody on the line currently, and don't put it in the live chat because I'll lose track of it if it's in the live chat. Comment to any one of my videos and tell me what two helmets I should add, and I will get them. So this is what we're going to do. We will run this for about... We'll run this for 2 weeks. The end of October 1st is going to be the deadline. October 1 is the deadline. And you tell me what two helmets between now and October 1st. I will look at all the comments, and you can write as many times as you want. They have to be separate comments. Whoever you want to see. And if you only want to see one team, then just put one team. You don't have to stretch it to two if you could care less to see a second helmet. But if you've got two, give them to me. Keep in mind, I got Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Washington. So I've got all the major conferences represented, except the Big 12. I don't have the Big 12. And I don't have the Group of Five. You can get creative if you want to see FAU. All right, so two teams that you want to see me get helmets for, and I will do that on October 1st. So by October 1st, NCIS Fanatic 21 just jumping on the line. Are you getting this? Here's the deadline, October 1st. You need to tell me what two helmets you want to see here, and do not tell me on the live chat. Bama boy, I've told you this. I'm going to lose track of this live chat. Send a comment to me because those, I keep those. Those are kept in YouTube, and I can access those easily. If I'm looking for stuff that you guys comment to on the live chat, it's there, but I've got to like scroll around and 3714. I don't know when he said that. Yeah, we're going to be on for 2 hours, so I'm not going to be able to find that. So in one of the comments on one of the videos, just leave it there. What two helmets do you want me to add? Colton, did you listen to me? Do not put it in the live chat. Leave it as a comment on one of the videos. You can leave it on this video, but it has to be after it's already posted. And then you can leave it in the comment section. But I'm not going to be able to find it in the live chat. Okay. Of course, Country Boy. Based on the viewership, Miami should win. My goal in the next year would be to balance out my viewership amongst all the major powers, all the major fan bases. Okay. You guys know, again, I'm not going to take down your comments from here. Please leave a comment in one of the videos. It can be this one, but it's got to be in the comments, not on the live chat. It does not have to be Power 5. Buckeye State Sports. It does not have to be in the Power 5. I will buy group of 5 helmets. They're probably tougher to find, but they're made. So yeah, we'll do that. So you guys have to keep me honest on that. October 1st. I got it written down right here. Hopefully I don't throw that away. My top 25s out there. Hopefully you guys have commented and watched that video. My bowl projections. That's right. Somebody wanted bowl projections. Got to work on that. Bowl projections. And I've got to work on my predictions and conference rankings. My week 4 predictions and conference rankings. Okay, I'm going to be busy. I don't know if I'm going to get to bowl projections. We're going to be back here tomorrow night, Thursday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time. It's not going to be an awfully long live stream because my boy's coming over to watch the Browns and the Jets. So that's a must watch. Browns, Jets, 8:30. So we'll have a good 90 minutes to kick it around at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Newsletter. Got to get the newsletter. Please let people know out there that they got to get the newsletter. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football newsletter. Just send your email to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. Also, Amazon. Please enter Amazon. When you shop on Amazon, please enter through one of the links that I have provided. Does Willie Taggart finish the year at FSU? Mark, he does. And at 1-2 right now, he might be looking at a 4-8 season, but he still is not going to lose that job. It would take something off the field. It would take a scandal of epic proportions, not football related, to get him out of there. He will get another year. Air Max is sending us a Camping World Bowl prediction of Texas and North Carolina State. Hey, I'd watch that game. Country Boy, Mark, put my alum up there. The FAMU Rattlers. Okay. Again, Country Boy, what did I say? Leave it in the comments, not on the live chat. Okay, so I'm going to be working on predictions for week 4. Do you guys realize I was 16-6 against the spread last week? And I got to tell you, this was the first week in about 2 years that I actually put money on the games, and it worked out rather well. I put money on the games this past week, 16-6 against the spread. So I've had a good week 1, a really good, solid week 1. 12-7, then an awful, almost all-time worst 6-13 week 2. I rebounded in a huge way with a 16-6, 73% against the spread last week. So I'm at 34-24. That's a pretty good, I'm guessing 58%, something in that range against the spread. What else do we have? What do you guys want me to work on? Because I've got a couple considerations to give you guys. Couple questions here. I had this idea, and this came from all the talk about Malik Rocher during the off season, and this guy sucks, or he's better than you think, and most of it was he sucks. That I thought the analysis that I should be giving is I should watch one of these games on the replay, and I should chart it. And even if you're not a football coach or scout, and obviously watching the games on television, we can't see the secondary play very often. Sometimes in the replays you can. So you can't be completely accurate, but I've watched football my whole life, and I played a little bit in high school. Didn't play past that, but we know football. We know football. We watched a ton of it. We've listened to coaches. We know it pretty well. That I would watch Malik Rocher's most difficult games down the stretch. The Wisconsin game, Clemson, Pitt. Watch those games and chart them to truly say, okay, he threw 30 passes and 10 times he just threw the ball into the turf over the guy's head. It was awful. And there were about 3 times when there were about 6 times that he got rushed and he threw a bad pass, but it's understandable. He just had guys hanging on him or right in his face, and he just let it go. And really chart the game. So this got me to thinking, because of all the analysis on Malik Rozier during the offseason in particular, and then certainly after the LSU game, that what if I would strike up a live stream and I would tell you, everybody go to this link, and I would put the link in the live chat, and it would be like a 30-minute cut down of a game. A big game from last week that came down to the wire. That was a really good game, at least. Ohio State, TCU, LSU, Auburn. And we're going to watch the game. We're going to watch the whole game together, a cut down version, either a 30 or 60-minute version of that game. And we're going to sit and watch the game together and break it down. Guys, have any interest in that whatsoever? Does that sound like something you guys would want to do? Let me know. Maybe I'll do it anyway. Will is flying from Chicago to New York. Connection perfect. Oh, connection perfect. Hit Washington State, USC. I know you're on that game, Will. I know nothing about Washington State that I didn't know before the season started. It's not like I've really crunched Washington State because they haven't played anyone. Let me get to my preseason notes on Washington State. Then we've got USC. I did see USC play about half of the Stanford game. I saw about half the Texas game. And we've talked a lot of USC on here with some of our USC media guests. Well, we know that the quarterback situation at Washington State was very difficult coming into this season. Coming off, of course, 9-4 last year, and I believe 7-2 in the Pac-12. I've lost the live stream here. Hang on. Okay. All right. My computer freaked out there for a second and didn't give me the playback. I'm looking through my notes preseason on Washington State. Just wondering, the storyline of this program is that Mike Leach has done an outstanding job since going 2-10 early, 3-9 early in his tenure there, after doing an outstanding job at Texas Tech. Consider what Mike Leach did at Texas Tech. He went 84-43. He won twice as many as he lost, and he finished ranked in the top 25 5 of his last 6 seasons at Texas Tech. Then Tommy Tuberville was there, I believe, 2 years. And then Cliff Kingsbury. How is this guy keeping his job? He's 30-33 entering this season. He is 16-28. Cliff Kingsbury, 16-28 against the Big 12. Now, Texas Tech has lost a couple games, or they lost to Ole Miss, and then they lost to Houston. No, they beat Houston, 63-49. So anyway, Texas Tech has not been able to duplicate the performance that they had under Mike Leach. So he's a tremendous coach. For as goofy as the guy is and odd and quirky, gets the job done. Prolific offense. Prolific offensive mind. So they had a rough off season. He was going to take the Tennessee job. The quarterback, unfortunately, Tyler Helinski, committed suicide. They lost a lot of other talent on both sides of the football and an improving defense over the last few years. So Gardner Minshew is the East Carolina transfer. Cameron Cooper is the guy that they would like to take over the job eventually. So we don't know much about Wazoo and them playing 3 cupcake games the first 3 weeks. Their deep threats were gone from last year's team. Their slot guys came back. A lot of guys that caught 30 and 40 passes, like Desmond Patton and Jameer Calvin. Renard Bell, Kyle Sweet, who caught 58 passes last year, and Tate Martin, 31 catches, 6 touchdowns. Their top running back, James Williams, back this year, who caught 71 passes. Their S&P Plus defensive ranking over the past 5 years has gone from 101 in the nation out of 130 FBS teams to 74 to 63 to 29. But then Alex Grinch hightailed it to Ohio State. Tracy Claeys takes over the defense. This is their first real test, and it's against a struggling USC offense that scored 3 points at Stanford and could not score in the second half against Texas. So Washington State, USC, we know what happened last season when USC went to Washington State. This time they get the return trip from the Cougars on a Friday night. So I'm not going to handicap this game. I do not have a beat on it right now. I will give you my prediction, of course, by Friday. All right. The other things that I was asking you guys was about watching the cut-down versions of games together on the live stream. So I don't know. I haven't gotten a rousing response on that. But that's my thought. I'm going to do it sometime and see if you guys respond. Also, there was one other thing I wanted to ask you guys concerning, live streams during the day. So we've got 27 people watching right now, and we've had probably at least 300 watch during the course of this particular live stream. And what I'm asking you guys is, in the past, when I've struck up a live stream during the day, I typically get crickets. And then about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, you guys are ready to roll. Less people are working. Okay. I have some issues with my schedule upcoming. Would you guys watch a live stream during the day? And if you did, what time would it need to be? So do not leave that in the chat either, because I won't be able to find it once this posts. So please give me a response on whether you guys would watch live streams during the day. And if so, what time? Because the metrics basically tell us that you have to do this kind of work at night. And if you do it during the day, you want to do it during the lunch hour when people can, hang out at lunch and listen to a podcast, listen to a live stream. George is telling me Big Papi and Mark Rogers all right at the same time. Yes, there is much competition out there. All right, folks. It's been a good time. 7 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday. Live stream. Same thing right back here. The other thing, let me ask you guys this. You are going to see less guests on here because my week is spent chasing people down. Chasing person A down to say, what works for you? Would you like to come on this week? Yeah. What time? How about 7 o'clock Thursday? No, can't make it. Back and forth, back and forth. Emails flying around all week. And then I don't necessarily know if you guys, based on what we do here during these live streams, when I'm on by myself, ranting all night, and you guys seem to respond more to that and talking to each other, that except for maybe a few select guests, you guys aren't necessarily in tune with me having guests on. So do I limit guests? I'm not going to eliminate guests, but limit the guests, which is what I'm thinking about doing, because it's a pain to track these people down and chase them down and figure out times. And especially when I've got a Wednesday night, let's say, that's loaded with guests. And you guys have seen it week after week after week. I'll have somebody on at 6:30, then 7, then 7:30, then 8, then 9. And I've got a slot open at 8:30, and that person can only make it on these other times, but they can't make it at 8:30. So then I ask the 8 o'clock person if they can make it at 8:30, and then I slide them and then ask. Yeah. So what I did tonight is I just sent out a link and said, and I'm going to have to get my media guests in tune with this. Here's the link. Get on it. Jump on it. If you would like to join the show and talk about your team and talk about your game, you're going to have to use this link. Come on anytime in the next 2 hours. That's what's going to happen in the future. It's going to be a lot less overhead for me. And again, I get the feeling from most of you that you would rather just hear me rant for 2 hours and talk amongst yourselves at the same time. And that's what we should do. Air Max, if TCU and Miami played in the Sugar Bowl, will you watch? Of course I'll watch. Mark, nobody cares about the guests unless it's me. Sorry, George, but you're technically not a guest. You're in the club. You're in the clubhouse. You're one of us. You call on the line, we put you on. So, media guests, you guys, my core, my peeps. All right. Okay, of course, NCIS Fanatic 21, bring on Steve Hellwagon and Claire Crawford the most. Cam is cool for Miami shows. Great. That I could have predicted that, but thank you for the confirmation. All right. Very good. So guests will come on if they want, but I'm not chasing down guests. We're going to do a lot of these live streams, and you're also going to see a lot of specialty videos by me, which means my top 25 predictions or my top 25 rankings, my predictions, what you saw earlier today with the TCU Texas preview and prediction, a lot of that, and a lot of live streams. And you guys, I'm not going to go through it right now, but you guys would be, I hope, encouraged if you knew how many people talked to me in the last like 3 or 4 days about opportunities. I had somebody trying to sell me or actually give me audio equipment in exchange for sponsorship. And I had 3 other people offer me sponsorship deals. And I had somebody else basically want me to go on their channel and host everything for them. And I had somebody else contact me and say, can you host a college football show over here? So it's really good stuff. I just have to figure out what I can and can't do. And I can't go over to that channel and this channel and that channel and do this and do that. And somebody else wanted me to do 3 prediction videos for their channel. Then I would be ignoring Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We can't have that. Do I see Miami's offensive line getting better? So I saw probably 10 offensive plays against Toledo. I saw the LSU game start to finish. Savannah State didn't really matter if I saw it or not. George, we're a bunch of unruly children that don't know what we want. So Unchained, I'm not going to make a call on Miami's offensive line. They got outplayed by LSU's defensive front. There's no question about that. That was Rocher, a lot of it, but it was also the LSU defensive front was better than Miami's offensive line, which doesn't surprise me or most of us. I don't know how they played against Toledo, but based on them completing a lot of balls downfield, which obviously take a lot of time to throw, they completed a lot of deep passes. Rocher didn't complete a lot of passes. His passing completion statistics were not impressive against Toledo, but he hit for big plays. And the running game was very solid. But I saw DJ Dallas take on a lot of those runs once he got to that second level. Sure, the offensive line got him to the second level, but he was a man. He was a beast. He was carrying guys, dragging guys down the field past the first level. The commercial about Ohio State's helmets has been the best part of the Reds game so far. I'm going to Florida at Tennessee this weekend. Colton, nice. It's funny. It makes me laugh every time I read it. I don't know what that is. Anyway, so Colton, see, this is another next step right here. You guys have a phone in your hand. You guys could knock out some kind of report, whether you want to do it in some kind of professional way or just a fan's way, however you want to do it. That would be the next step. You send me the link and I post your little video. You do a pregame, you do a halftime, you do a postgame. Of course, the postgame would be the video that would last and have the most life, the longest. But what do you guys think of that? Colton, shoot something from the stadium. And if you don't want to do that, go have a good time. I'm just saying, if you want to, then contact me. But go have a good time if you don't feel like shooting you wouldn't have to be on for 20 minutes. Shoot a 1-minute video. That would be the next thing. To have people out at the stadiums in the field would be. I have been thinking about that for years, and approached certain people that said that they wanted to do stuff, and then they never get around to doing it. Oh, Buckeye State Sports. Yeah, just have somebody turn a camera on you or turn it on yourself if you'd like. Again, go have a good time. But if you think about it and can get me that link, I would post a video. All right, guys. Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern time. And it's going to be me ranting, and it may be some guests or it may not be guests, and it's going to be you if you call the phone line. Put this somewhere where you can see it all the time. 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687. Colton, same with you. Go enjoy the game. No pressure, no worries. Just throwing it out there that it would be awesome to get that started for you guys to throw me some videos with just, hey, even if you just want to tailgate and say, hey, we're having a good time out here, as long as it's relatively clean. Or you want to give me a game report, a pregame, a postgame, a halftime report, that would be cool too. Okay. Tennessee is a 5-point underdog at home. That's interesting to Will. All right, guys, I appreciate it. I will see you all back on Thursday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time for more from the voice of college football, Mark Rogers TV. You guys are tremendous, and my thing didn't shut off here.